The diamond on my finger caught the chandelier's light, but all I could focus on was Lloyd Fowler's condescending smirk from across the mahogany table. I'm Amelia, and this was supposed to be the dinner where Charlie's father finally accepted me into their world. Instead, it became the night I decided to burn that world down. So, Amelia, Lloyd's voice dripped with fake politeness, swirling his aged whiskey. Remind me again what your parents do for a living? Charlie squeezed my hand under the table. Dad, we've been through this. I'm just making conversation, son. Lloyd's eyes never left mine. After all, if she's joining the family, we should know everything about her background. I straightened my spine, the way my mother taught me. My mom's a high school teacher, and my father passed away when I was 12. Ah, yes, now I remember. Public school, wasn't it? He turned to his wife. Margaret, didn't your cousin's cleaning lady's daughter teach at a public school? Charlie's fork clattered against his plate. That's enough. What? I'm simply pointing out that Amelia comes from different circumstances. Lloyd dabbed his mouth with a napkin that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Charlie, son, you're set to inherit a Fortune 500 company. Have you considered what that means? The responsibilities? The social obligations? I love her, Charlie said firmly. That's all that matters. Lloyd laughed, the sound hollow and cruel. Love doesn't maintain social standing, boy. Love doesn't secure business deals at country clubs. My cheeks burned, but I refused to look down. I may not have been born into wealth, Mr. Fowler, but I have other qualities. Oh, like what, dear? Your charming personality? He leaned forward. Let me be frank. You seem like a lovely girl, but you're simply not Fowler material. Our family has a legacy to protect. Dad! Charlie stood up, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You can't talk to her like that. I placed my hand on Charlie's arm. It's okay. My voice was steady, despite the hurricane in my chest. Your father's entitled to his opinion. Lloyd raised his glass in mock salute. See? At least she knows her place. That's when something inside me snapped. I rose slowly, placing my napkin on the table with deliberate care. You're right about one thing, Mr. Fowler. I'm not Fowler material. I'm better. And one day, very soon, you'll regret underestimating me. Is that a threat? His amusement only fueled my determination. No, it's a promise. I turned to Charlie. I'll wait in the car. As I walked out, head high, I heard Lloyd's voice. Son, you can't seriously be considering marrying someone so beneath us. In the car, Charlie found me 10 minutes later. He slid into the driver's seat, his face flushed with anger. I'm so sorry, Amelia. He had no right. Do you agree with him? The question hung between us like smoke. Of course not. He took my hand. You're brilliant, kind, ambitious, but not good enough for the Fowler name? You're more than good enough. He kissed my knuckles. We'll prove him wrong together. I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. Together. If only he knew what was already forming in my mind. The seed of an idea that would grow into an empire. I'd been working on a business concept, an ethical fashion platform that could revolutionize the industry. Now, it wasn't just a dream anymore. It was my weapon. My phone buzzed. A text from my best friend, Caitlin. How'd it go with Papa Fowler? I typed back, time to launch the platform. You in? Her response was immediate. Hell yes, revenge is best served with a side of success. Charlie started the car, the engine purring like the wealth it represented. Want to grab some ice cream? Try to salvage the night? Actually, can you drop me at home? I have some work to do. He looked concerned. Don't let him get to you, babe. His opinion doesn't matter. But it did matter. Every dismissive glance, every condescending remark. they all mattered. They would fuel me through the sleepless nights ahead, through the rejection letters and setbacks, through every obstacle until I could stand in front of Lloyd Fowler again, this time as his equal, or better yet, his superior. As we drove through the city, past the gleaming skyscrapers that housed empires like the one Lloyd commanded, I made a silent vow. The next time I sat at that table, it wouldn't be as the poor teacher's daughter he could dismiss with a wave of his manicured hand. It would be as someone who had built something of her own, something that would make his precious legacy look like child's play. Game on, Lloyd. Game on. You want to take on the entire fast fashion industry? Caitlin sprawled across my tiny apartment's couch, raising an eyebrow. Girl, I love your ambition, but that's like trying to fight a tank with a water pistol. I paced the room, gesturing at my laptop screen. Look at these numbers. 70% of millennials say they'd pay more for sustainable fashion. The market is there. We just need to make it accessible. And stick it to Daddy Dearest in the process? She grinned. That's just a bonus. I pulled up my presentation. The platform connects ethical manufacturers directly with consumers. No middlemen, no exploitation, complete transparency about working conditions and materials. My phone buzzed. Another text from Charlie. I ignored it, just like the previous 5. You can't avoid him forever, Caitlin said softly. I'm not avoiding him. I'm focusing. A knock at the door interrupted us. I opened it to find Bowen, my former business professor turned mentor, holding 2 cups of coffee. You sounded excited on the phone, he said, handing me a cup. Show me what you've got. For the next hour, I walked them through my vision. The website mock-ups, the marketing strategy, the financial projections. Bowen asked tough questions, making notes while Caitlin chimed in with social media ideas. It's good, Bowen said finally. Really good, but you'll need serious funding. I've got some savings. He shook his head. We're talking millions, Amelia. This isn't a small startup. You're trying to disrupt an established industry. I know someone. Caitlin sat up straight. Remember Marcus from college? He's working for Summit Ventures now. I could set up a meeting. My phone buzzed again. This time, it was my mother. Honey, Charlie called me. He's worried about you. I'm fine, Mom. Just busy with a new project. Is this about what happened at dinner? Grace told me you haven't returned her calls either. I pinched the bridge of my nose. Mom, I can't talk right now. I'm in a meeting. Don't let pride cloud your judgment, sweetheart. Some things are more important than... I have to go. Love you. I hung up, turning back to find both Caitlin and Bowen watching me. What? I challenged. Nothing. Bowen raised his hands in surrender. But remember, the best revenge isn't just success, it's sustainable success. Don't burn bridges you might need later. My laptop pinged. An email from Summit Ventures. My heart raced as I opened it. Dear Ms. Fox, thank you for your interest. After reviewing your proposal, we would like to schedule a meeting. Yes, I jumped up, pulling Caitlin into a hug. They want to meet. When? Bowen leaned forward. Next Thursday at 2 p.m. Perfect, he nodded. We'll prep over the weekend. You'll need solid answers about scalability, market penetration. Another knock. This time, it was Charlie. Hey, he said, looking tired. Can we talk? I glanced at Caitlin and Bowen. They took the hint, gathering their things. Call me later, Caitlin whispered, squeezing my arm as she left. Once we were alone, Charlie sat heavily on the couch. You're really doing this, aren't you? Doing what? This. He gestured at my laptop. The papers spread across the coffee table. Going to war with my father. I'm starting a business, Charlie. A legitimate, potentially world-changing business. That just happens to be exactly what would upset him most? He ran a hand through his hair. I know he was awful to you, but what? I should just accept it? Play the humble, grateful girlfriend? No, He stood up, pacing. I don't want this to change you. Change us. I softened, taking his hand. It won't. This is still me, just me fighting for what I deserve. Promise me something? His eyes met mine. Promise you won't lose yourself in this revenge plot. It's not about revenge, I lied. It's about proving something to myself. He pulled me close, and I buried my face in his chest, breathing in his familiar scent. But even as he held me, my mind was racing with pitch ideas, market strategies, ways to make my platform impossible for Lloyd to ignore. My phone lit up with a text from Bowen. Got you a meeting with Soleil Elliott tomorrow. She's tough but could be a game changer. I smiled against Charlie's shirt. Soleil was known for taking down giants in the industry. Having her on board would be like adding gasoline to my fire. What are you thinking about? Charlie asked. The future, I replied. And I was, just maybe not the future he imagined. The game was officially in play, and I was holding all the right cards. Lloyd Fowler wouldn't know what hit him. Unfortunately, we'll have to pass. The Summit Ventures executive closed his laptop with a decisive click. Your concept is interesting, but you lack the experience we're looking for. My carefully rehearsed pitch turned to ash in my mouth. After 3 sleepless nights preparing, this wasn't how the meeting was supposed to end. I understand your concerns. I leaned forward, but the market research clearly shows. Ms. Fox, he interrupted, passion isn't enough. Come back when you have more industry experience. The elevator ride down felt like a funeral procession. My phone buzzed. Caitlin checking in. Before I could respond, another call came through. My day job's office number. Amelia, where are you? My manager's voice was tight. The client presentation started 15 minutes ago. My stomach dropped. Sarah, I'm so sorry. There was an emergency. This is the 3rd time this month. We need to talk when you get back. The call ended with a click. I slumped against the elevator wall, my reflection showing dark circles under my eyes that even concealer couldn't hide. Back at my desk, Sarah's talk was brief and brutal. Consider this your final warning. One more missed meeting, and we'll have to let you go. That night, I sat cross-legged on my apartment floor, surrounded by takeout containers and spreadsheets. My laptop screen blurred as exhaustion set in. A knock startled me. Charlie stood in the doorway, holding grocery bags. When's the last time you ate something that didn't come in a cardboard box? He started unpacking fresh vegetables. I had a salad. Yesterday. Maybe. I rubbed my eyes. What are you doing here? Being your fiancé, he began chopping tomatoes. You missed dinner with my sister last night. That was last night? I checked my phone. 6 missed calls from various family members. I'll make it up to her. Like you made up missing Mom's birthday last week? He set down the knife. What happened to the meeting today? They passed. My voice cracked. Said I needed more experience. Charlie wrapped his arms around me from behind. Then we'll find another investor. But you need to take care of yourself first. I can't slow down. Not now. I pulled away, checking my email for the 100th time. Amelia. My phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Amelia Fox? A woman's crisp voice asked. This is Soleil Elliott. My heart jumped. Yes, this is she. I heard about your meeting with Summit. Their loss. I'm interested in your platform. Charlie watched as I paced the kitchen. Really? I mean, yes, I'd love to discuss it. Dinner, tomorrow, 7 p.m. at La Maison. She named one of the city's most exclusive restaurants. Don't be late. The line went dead. I turned to Charlie, grinning. Soleil Elliott wants to meet. The same Soleil Elliott known for hostile takeovers? The same one who turned 3 failing companies into billion-dollar enterprises. I was already mentally planning my outfit. Just be careful. He resumed chopping vegetables. She has a reputation. For success, I countered, which is exactly what I need. My phone buzzed again. My mother. Honey, we need to talk about the wedding plans. The venue needs a deposit by Friday. I glanced at the engagement ring on my finger. When was the last time I'd even thought about wedding planning? Can we discuss this later, Mom? I have a big meeting tomorrow. That's what you said last week, and the week before. She sighed. Grace says you haven't even looked at the flower arrangements she sent. I'll call you back. I hung up, turning to find Charlie staring at me. You haven't looked at the flowers? I've been busy. Too busy for our wedding? Before I could answer, my laptop pinged. An email from Bowen. Got the market analysis you needed, but we need to talk about your burnout rate. I have to respond to this, I told Charlie. He set down the spatula. The food's ready. Will you at least eat with me? I nodded, but my fingers were already typing. The pasta grew cold as I drafted my response, ran numbers, and prepared for tomorrow's meeting. Charlie left around midnight, kissing my forehead with a worried look. Don't stay up too late. But at 3 a.m., I was still at my desk, researching everything about Soleil Elliott, her investments, her strategies, her weaknesses. The sun was rising when I finally crawled into bed. My phone lit up one last time. A text from Caitlin. Heard about Summit, their loss. But girl, when's the last time you slept? I ignored it, setting my alarm for 2 hours later. Sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford, not when I was this close to my breakthrough. Besides, I thought as exhaustion pulled me under. Lloyd Fowler probably wasn't losing any sleep over me. Yet, Soleil Elliott didn't shake hands. She assessed me over the rim of her wine glass, her dark eyes calculating. You're younger than I expected. Is that a problem? I settled into my chair at La Maison, grateful I'd splurged on a new blazer. Age is irrelevant. Results matter. She set down her glass. Tell me why Lloyd Fowler's future daughter-in-law wants to disrupt the fashion industry. My fingers tightened around my water glass. You've done your research. I don't waste time with people I haven't vetted. She smiled, all teeth. The question is, are you doing this for the right reasons? Does it matter if the platform succeeds? It matters if you're going to crack under pressure. She leaned forward. This industry will eat you alive if you're running on spite alone. The waiter appeared. Soleil ordered in perfect French without glancing at the menu. I scrambled to follow suit. Here's what I see, she continued after he left. A brilliant concept with massive potential, but also a woman so focused on proving something, she's burning every bridge behind her. I'm not. You missed your own mother's birthday, postponed wedding planning, nearly lost your day job. She raised an eyebrow. Am I wrong? Heat crept up my neck. How do you know all this? Like I said, I vet thoroughly. She pulled out her phone, showing me a screen full of numbers. Your platform could revolutionize ethical fashion, but revenge is a terrible business model. This isn't about revenge. Lie to yourself if you must. Don't lie to me. She set down her phone. I'm offering you $5 million in seed funding. My heart stopped. What's the catch? Smart girl, she smiled again. You get my experience, connections, and money. I get 51% ownership. That's more than half the company. That's protection from yourself. She took another sip of wine. You need someone who can separate business from personal vendettas. Before I could respond, I spotted a familiar figure across the restaurant. Lloyd Fowler was dining with what looked like business associates. Soleil followed my gaze. Interesting? Did you know he'd be here? No, Then this is your first test. What do you do now? I watched Lloyd laugh, probably at another cruel joke at someone else's expense. My hands itched to walk over there, to show him the term sheet Soleil was offering. Nothing, I said finally. This isn't the time or place. Good answer. She pulled out a contract. Let's discuss terms. 2 hours later, I stepped out into the cool night air, my head spinning with possibilities. My phone had 17 missed calls, 3 from Charlie, 5 from my mother, the rest from Caitlin. I called Caitlin first. Finally, she answered, your mom's freaking out. She showed up at my place looking for you. What? Why? The wedding venue? They needed the deposit today. Charlie's been trying to reach you. My stomach dropped. That was today? Girl, you need to get your priorities straight. Charlie's at your place waiting. I found him sitting on my doorstep, looking defeated. I lost the venue, he said quietly. We'll find another one. Will we? When? He stood up. You've missed every appointment, every tasting, every decision. I just secured $5 million in funding, I said, hoping to change the subject. Soleil Elliott is investing. Congratulations. His voice was flat. Did you tell her about your real motivation? What's that supposed to mean? You know exactly what it means. He ran a hand through his hair. You're so focused on proving yourself to my father, you've forgotten about everyone else who loves you. That's not fair. No? When's the last time you called your mom? Really talked to her? He stepped closer. When's the last time we had a conversation that wasn't about your platform or my father? My phone buzzed. Soleil sending over the final contract. I need to review this, I said, already opening the email. Charlie's laugh was hollow. Of course you do. He walked past me. Let me know when my fiancé comes back. I watched him leave, the contract glowing on my phone screen. A text from my mother followed. Family dinner tomorrow. Non-negotiable. We need to talk. Another message popped up from Soleil. Remember what I said about burning bridges? Some fires can't be put out. I looked at the engagement ring on my finger, then at the contract that could change everything. Success was within reach, but Charlie was right. At what cost? The answer would have to wait. I had a contract to review and a family dinner to survive, one crisis at a time. Rising star disrupts fashion industry. The headline blazed across my screen as Caitlin squealed, hugging me from behind. You're trending. She scrolled through the comments. The sustainable fashion community is going crazy over the platform launch. I should have been ecstatic. Instead, I stared at my engagement ring, now sitting in its box on my desk. Charlie had left it there this morning, along with a note. Taking some time to think. Call when you're ready to talk about us, not business. My phone rang. Soleil. Have you seen the numbers? She didn't wait for my answer. 10,000 sign-ups in the first hour. Major brands are reaching out for partnerships. That's amazing. Why do you sound like someone died? A pause. Ah, the fiancé left. How did you... Your social media manager messaged me. She's worried about your emotional state affecting the brand. I spun around. Caitlin! She shrugged, unrepentant. Someone had to say something. Both of you need to stay out of my personal life. Your personal life affects my investment. Soleil's voice sharpened. Fix it before the gala next week. We need you focused. The line went dead. Caitlin perched on my desk, face serious. She's right, you know. You're not sleeping, barely eating. Charlie's gone. Your mom's worried sick. I'm fine. I stood up, pacing. The platform is exceeding all projections. That's what matters. Is it? She picked up the engagement ring box. Because the Amelia I know wouldn't think success was worth losing Charlie. Before I could respond, Bowen burst in. We have a problem. He pulled up an email on his tablet. Someone's trying to sabotage the supply chain. 3 manufacturers just pulled out. My blood ran cold. Who? Anonymous pressure, but... He hesitated. The tactics match Lloyd's previous business dealings. Of course, I should have expected this. He's trying to kill the platform before it really takes off. That's not all. Bowen scrolled down. There's rumors circulating about unethical practices in our partner factories. All false, but damage control will take time we don't have. I finished. My phone buzzed. My mother again. I ignored it. Amelia, Caitlin's voice was gentle. You need to talk to Charlie. His father might back off if... No. I grabbed my laptop. I'm not using Charlie to fight this battle. We'll find new manufacturers, better ones. There's something else, Bowen said quietly. The gala next week, Lloyd's being honored for lifetime achievement in business. Laughter bubbled up, slightly hysterical. Perfect, just perfect. My phone kept buzzing. This time, it was Grace. Mom, I can't talk right now. Your sister's in the hospital. The world stopped. What? Anxiety attack. She's been trying to reach you for days about the wedding catering. Her voice cracked. The doctors say stress triggered it. I'll be right there. I grabbed my coat. Don't bother. The ice in her voice froze me mid-motion. You're too busy changing the world to care about family, remember? She hung up. I stood there, coat half on, as the room spun. Sit down. Caitlin guided me to a chair. Breathe. I did this. My voice shook. I was so focused on proving Lloyd wrong, I didn't see. It's not too late. She squeezed my shoulder. But you need to decide what matters more, revenge or the people who love you. My laptop pinged with another alert. Platform users double overnight. Revolutionary business model attracts global attention. Bowen cleared his throat. The manufacturers need an answer by morning. And Soleil wants a strategy for the gala, Caitlin added. I looked at the engagement ring, then at the headlines praising my success. The platform was everything I'd dreamed of, but the cost... My phone lit up with a text from Charlie. Dad's bragging about destroying your supply chain. Please tell me you're not letting him win. Another text followed. I still love you, but I miss the Amelia who wanted to change the world for the right reasons. Tears blurred my vision as notifications kept flooding in. Praise, partnership offers, media requests. Everything I'd worked for was happening, so why did victory taste like ashes? What do you want me to tell Soleil? Bowen asked softly. I picked up the engagement ring, its diamond catching the light just like that night at Lloyd's dinner. Tell her. I took a deep breath. Tell her I need an hour. I have to visit someone in the hospital first. Caitlin smiled. Now that sounds like the old Amelia. But as I grabbed my keys, another email arrived. Urgent. Major investor threatens withdrawal over ethics concerns. The war with Lloyd was escalating. The question was, how many more casualties would there be before it ended? Your sister's asking for you. Mom's voice stopped me in the hospital hallway. Try not to upset her this time. Grace lay in the hospital bed, looking smaller than I remembered. Her eyes fixed on me as I entered. Look who finally showed up. She managed a weak smile. I'm so sorry. I sat beside her, taking her hand. I've been busy. Yeah, I read about you in Tech Weekly. She squeezed my fingers. Dad would have been proud and worried. Grace, remember what he used to say? Success means nothing if you're too busy to enjoy Sunday dinner. She tried to sit up, wincing. When's the last time you had Sunday dinner, Amelia? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. Soleil. Take it, Grace said. It's probably important. I declined the call. Nothing's more important right now. That's new. Mom appeared with coffee. Usually your precious platform takes priority. Margaret, Grace warned. No, she needs to hear this. Mom set down the cups harder than necessary. Your sister's been planning your wedding for months. Alone? Charlie's been making excuses for you. Alone. And where have you been? Building a successful company. Building walls, she corrected, just like after your father died, throwing yourself into work instead of dealing with feelings. My phone buzzed again. Bowen this time. I ignored it. The platform's doing well, I said quietly. Really well. And, Mom crossed her arms, and I'm miserable. The admission hung in the air. I'm winning, but I'm losing everything that matters. Grace patted the bed beside her. I sat, letting her rest her head on my shoulder like when we were kids. Charlie came by yesterday, she said softly. My heart stopped. What? He wanted to know if you were okay. Said he's worried you're becoming exactly what you're fighting against. My phone lit up with breaking news. Lloyd Fowler accused of unethical business practices. Anonymous source reveals documents. That wasn't me, I whispered. Grace took my phone, reading. No, but it could have been. That's what scares him. And us, Mom added. A text from Soleil flashed. Emergency meeting. Now, your office. Go, Grace said. But remember what you just said about what matters. I kissed her forehead and rushed to the office, finding Soleil pacing while Bowen and Caitlin watched nervously. Someone leaked documents about Lloyd's sweatshop connections, Soleil said without preamble. The press thinks it was us. It wasn't. Doesn't matter. He's threatening to sue for defamation. She thrust a paper at me. And he's calling in favors to tank our stock before it goes public. Can he do that? He already is. Bowen pulled up financial projections. We're hemorrhaging investors. My phone rang. Charlie. Did you do this? His voice was tight. No, Charlie, I swear. Dad's on the warpath. He thinks you're behind the leak. I'm not. A pause. I believe you. But Amelia, this has to stop. Someone's going to get really hurt. I know. I looked at the engagement ring box on my desk. Can we talk? In person? The gala's tomorrow. Dad's accepting his award. Another pause. Meet me there? Charlie, it's time to end this, one way or another. He hung up. Soleil was watching me, her expression unreadable. The gala's our chance, she said. We can announce our IPO, show Lloyd he can't touch us. Or, Caitlin interjected, you could try talking to him, like an actual human being. He doesn't deserve. This isn't about what he deserves, Bowen cut in. It's about who you want to be. My phone buzzed with a text from Grace. Choose love over pride, sis. Dad always said pride makes good fuel but terrible foundation. I looked at my team, Soleil ready for war, Caitlin concerned, Bowen waiting patiently. The gala, I said finally, but not for revenge. We need to end this. How? Soleil demanded. I picked up the engagement ring. By remembering why I started this in the first place, not to destroy Lloyd, but to prove something to myself. And Charlie? Caitlin asked softly. And Charlie. I slipped the ring back on. Some things are worth more than winning. Soleil sighed dramatically. Just tell me you're not going to tank my investment with some grand gesture of reconciliation. No, I smiled. But I am going to show Lloyd what real success looks like. Not by tearing him down, but by rising above. My phone lit up one last time. Mom, Sunday dinner this week, non-negotiable. Bring Charlie. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. First, I told my team, we have a gala to prepare for, and I need to make some things right. The war wasn't over, but maybe it was time for a different kind of victory. The gala ballroom sparkled with wealth and influence, but my eyes were fixed on Charlie standing by the bar. He looked up, our gazes meeting across the room. Ready? Caitlin adjusted my dress, a sustainable silk creation from our platform's top designer. As I'll ever be. I clutched my speech cards. Soleil appeared, sleek in black. Lloyd's about to take the stage. Sure you want to do this? Before I could answer, the microphone crackled. Lloyd stood at the podium, commanding the room with practiced ease. Business, his voice boomed, is about legacy, about building something that lasts. Charlie moved closer to the stage. I weaved through the crowd until I stood beside him. "Hi," I whispered. He took my hand without looking at me. "Dad rehearsed this speech for weeks." "For 30 years," Lloyd continued, "I've built an empire based on tradition, on maintaining the status quo." The doors burst open. All heads turned as Grace wheeled herself in, Mom pushing her chair. "Sorry, we're late," Grace announced loudly. "Hospital discharge took forever." Lloyd faltered. "As I was saying," my phone buzzed. A message from Bowen. "Breaking news ready to go live. Give the signal." Some would say, Lloyd regained his momentum, that the old ways are the best ways. That disruption threatens everything we've built. "Now," I texted back. Every phone in the room chimed simultaneously. I watched as hundreds of faces looked down at their screens. Ethical fashion platform secures major global partnership. Industry giants join revolutionary movement. Lloyd's voice died as he read the headline. His eyes found me in the crowd. "Mr. Fowler," I called out, my voice steady. "May I say something?" The room held its breath. Charlie squeezed my hand. "The stage is yours," Lloyd said tightly. I walked up, heart pounding but spine straight. "You spoke about legacy, about tradition, but true legacy isn't about maintaining the status quo. It's about making the world better than we found it." Phones kept buzzing as more news broke. Major brands pledging to our ethical standards, celebrity endorsements, stock prices soaring. "When you rejected me as your son's fiancé," I continued, "you said I wasn't good enough for the Fowler name. You were right." Lloyd's face darkened. "I'm not good enough for the Fowler name. I'm better. Not because of money or success, but because I chose to build rather than destroy, to lift people up rather than tear them down." Grace wheeled closer, smiling through tears. "Our platform isn't just disrupting fashion, it's changing lives. Factory workers receiving fair wages, sustainable practices saving environments, communities thriving." I turned to face Lloyd directly. "You taught Charlie that business is about power, but he taught me that true power comes from using success to help others." The room erupted in applause. Lloyd stood frozen, his carefully crafted speech forgotten. "One more thing," I said, turning to Charlie. "I've been so focused on proving myself, I almost lost the person who believed in me from the start." I walked down the steps, taking both his hands in mine. "Charlie Fowler, will you marry me? Not for your name or your father's approval, but because I love you?" The room went silent. Lloyd stepped forward, opening his mouth. "Yes," Charlie said firmly. "1,000 times yes." More applause. Grace cheered. Mom wiped her eyes. Lloyd cleared his throat. "Well played, Amelia. This isn't about playing games anymore." I met his gaze. "It's about family, real family. You're welcome to be part of it if you can accept that your son chose love over legacy." A long moment passed. Then Lloyd did something I'd never seen before. He laughed, really laughed. "You know," he said, shaking his head, "you remind me of someone." "Who?" "Me, 30 years ago." He looked at Charlie. "Before I forgot what really matters." Soleil appeared with champagne. "To new beginnings?" "To family," Mom corrected, wheeling Grace closer. "To both," Charlie said, pulling me close. My phone buzzed one last time. Bowen. "Stock just tripled. Congratulations, boss." But I was already putting my phone away. Grace was right. Some moments were too important for business. "Sunday dinner," I said to Lloyd. "Our place. No business talk allowed." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll bring the wine." As the party swirled around us, Charlie whispered, "Was it worth it, all of this?" I looked at my family, old and new, broken and healing, at my team celebrating our success, at Lloyd attempting to help Mom navigate Grace's wheelchair. Yes, I said, but not for the reasons I thought. The platform would change the world, but tonight wasn't about that. Tonight was about something bigger than success or revenge. It was about coming home. "You're burning the potatoes," Mom called from the living room. "I've got it." I rescued the pan just in time, the familiar chaos of Sunday dinner swirling around me. Grace sat at the kitchen island folding napkins. "Remember when you couldn't even boil water?" "That was before Charlie taught me." I winked at my husband, who was expertly carving the roast. "Speaking of teaching," Lloyd entered carrying wine. "How's the mentorship program going?" The program had been his idea, using our platform to help young entrepreneurs from underprivileged backgrounds. His way of making amends, though he'd never say it outright. 20 new students starting next week," I said. "Soleil's handling the interviews." "No shop talk at dinner," Mom reminded us, setting down a salad bowl. "House rules." The doorbell rang. Caitlin burst in with Bowen, carrying dessert. "Sorry, we're late," she announced. "Someone insisted on checking the quarterly reports one last time." "It's called being thorough," Bowen defended. Charlie laughed. "Some things never change." As we gathered around the table, I watched my family, the one I was born into and the one I'd built. Grace discussing her physical therapy progress with Lloyd, Mom showing Caitlin her new gardening photos, Bowen and Charlie debating soccer teams. "Pass the potatoes," Lloyd said, then added quietly, "They're not burned this time." "High praise from you," I teased. His expression softened. "I was wrong about you, Amelia, about a lot of things." We were both wrong about what mattered. The conversation flowed easily now, nothing like those tense early dinners when we were all still healing. Grace had recovered fully. The platform was thriving. Even Lloyd had changed, though he still couldn't resist checking stock prices under the table. "Put the phone away, Dad." Charlie caught him. "Just one quick—" "Nope." I reached over and confiscated it. "Tonight's about family." "Speaking of family," Grace's eyes twinkled. "When are you two giving Mom some grandkids?" Charlie choked on his wine. I laughed, remembering a time when such questions would have sparked tension. "We're practicing," I winked, making Lloyd suddenly very interested in his potatoes. "Before babies," Caitlin interrupted, "we need to discuss the real crisis. Your office plants are dying." "They are not." "Amelia," Mom sighed, "even your father could keep plants alive, and he killed plastic flowers." The table erupted in laughter, sharing stories about Dad that no longer hurt to tell. "He would have loved this," Grace said softly. "The dinner or the success?" Lloyd asked. "Both," Mom answered, "but mostly seeing his daughters happy." Charlie squeezed my hand under the table. We shared a look, the kind that held entire conversations. "Actually," I said, "we do have an announcement." The table went quiet. Even Lloyd set down his fork. "The platform's expanding," Charlie started. "I thought no business talk," Mom began. "Into a foundation," I finished, "for supporting working mothers in the fashion industry. We're naming it after Dad." Grace's eyes welled up. Mom covered her mouth. "That's—" Lloyd cleared his throat. "That's remarkable." "We want all of you involved," Charlie said, "each bringing your strengths." "Even me?" Lloyd asked, surprising vulnerability in his voice. "Especially you," I said. "You taught me something important. Success means nothing if you're not lifting others up." "Look who's getting soft," Caitlin teased, but she was wiping her eyes too. "To new beginnings," Bowen raised his glass. "And old wisdom," Mom added. "And family," Grace finished. As glasses clinked, I looked around the table. The ring on my finger caught the light, not as a symbol of status anymore, but of love. The platform had changed the industry, yes, but this had changed me. Dessert time, Caitlin announced, breaking the moment. Wait, Lloyd stood up. I have something to say. We all held our breath, old habits dying hard. I spent years building walls to protect what I thought mattered, he said. Amelia, you built bridges instead. Thank you for showing this old man a better way. Dad, Charlie started. I'm not finished, Lloyd smiled. Pass the cake, and someone give me back my phone. I promise, no stock checking. Nice try, I laughed, pocketing it. As dessert was served and stories continued, I caught Charlie's eye again. He nodded slightly. He felt it too. This was what winning really looked like, not in headlines or stock prices, but in moments like these. The revenge I'd sought had transformed into something better. Redemption. For all of us. More wine? Lloyd offered. Always, I smiled, holding out my glass. Some bridges, it turned out, were built one Sunday dinner at a time.
The earliest memory I have of my mother is the scent of her lavender perfume. I was 4 years old when she died, but that fragrance still haunts me, especially on quiet nights when I'm alone in my room, trying to piece together the fragments of our brief time together. My name is Chloe, and this is the story of how I lost 2 families and found myself. I don't remember much from the weeks after Mom died. Most of my time was spent at my grandparents' house, a cozy 2-story home that would later play a crucial role in my life. Grandma Martha and Grandpa Joe tried their best to shield me from the pain, keeping me occupied with cookies and stories while Dad handled the funeral arrangements. 1 year passed in a blur of transitions between Dad's house and my grandparents'. I didn't realize it then, but looking back, I can see how Dad was gradually pulling away, spending less time with me and more time elsewhere. I'd hear snippets of adult worry, words like too soon and moving on, but I was too young to understand their significance. I was 5 when Dad brought home the news that would change everything. I remember sitting on our worn living room couch, my small legs barely reaching the edge, when he walked in with a woman I'd seen a few times before. She had long brown hair and a kind smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Chloe, honey, Dad said, his voice carrying a forced cheerfulness that even my young mind detected, this is Linda. We got married last weekend, and she's going to be your new mom. I stared at Linda's stomach, which showed a noticeable bump under her flowered dress. Dad followed my gaze and added, and you're going to have a baby sister soon. Isn't that exciting? The word exciting hung in the air like a lead balloon. Linda stepped forward, her hands clasped in front of her. I know this is a lot to take in, Chloe. But I promise we'll make it work. I remember nodding, not because I agreed, but because it seemed like the thing to do. I retreated to my room that night and pulled out the only photo I had of my mom showing her holding me as a baby, both of us laughing at something off camera. I touched her face gently, trying to remember the sound of her laugh. It was strange watching Dad transform into a different person. The man who used to spend weekends taking me to the park now spent his time painting the nursery and attending birthing classes with Linda. I tried not to mind, really, I did. After all, Linda wasn't unkind to me. She'd drive me to school in her blue Honda, ask about my day, and make sure I had everything I needed. But there was always something temporary about her attention, like she was babysitting rather than parenting. I'd catch her absent-mindedly rubbing her growing belly while I told her about my day at school, her eyes glazed with thoughts of her own baby. Linda, can we get ice cream? I asked one afternoon after school. Not today, sweetie. I need to rest, the baby's been kicking all day, she replied, heading straight for the couch. It became a common response, not today, maybe later, another time. Then Emma arrived. I remember the day Dad brought them home from the hospital. He was carrying this tiny bundle wrapped in a pink blanket, his face glowing with a pride I'd never seen before, not even in the photos of him holding me as a baby. Chloe, meet your baby sister, Emma, he announced, his voice soft with wonder. I stood on my tiptoes to peek at the red-faced infant. "Hi, Emma," I whispered, trying to sound like the responsible big sister I was supposed to be. That's when everything changed. Suddenly, there were new rules in the house, all revolving around Emma. "Chloe, please don't run in the house, Emma's sleeping." "Chloe, can you help fold these clothes while I feed Emma?" "Not so loud, honey. You'll upset your sister." I became a shadow in my own home, tiptoeing around, trying to make myself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. My responsibilities grew while my privileges shrank. I learned to clean bottles, fold tiny clothes, and tidy up toys that weren't mine. One day, I came home from school to find Dad and Linda cooing over Emma, who was playing with a brand new tablet designed for babies. "Look how smart she is," Linda exclaimed as Emma randomly hit the screen. "She's going to be a genius." I glanced down at my worn-out sneakers, remembering how Dad had said we couldn't afford new ones this month. But here was Emma, barely able to walk, with the latest educational gadgets scattered around her. The pattern continued. Emma got designer clothes from the mall while I got hand-me-downs from our cousins. She had a room full of the latest toys while I still treasured the stuffed bear my mom had given me, now missing an eye and patched in several places. It wasn't that they were cruel. They remembered to feed me, clothe me, send me to school. But it was always an afterthought, like checking off a box on a to-do list. The only time they seemed to really notice me was when Grandma and Grandpa visited. "Chloe needs new clothes," Grandma would point out, and suddenly Dad would remember to take me shopping. "Don't you think Chloe might like that new book series all the kids are reading?" Grandpa would suggest, and magically, the books would appear. I tried to be understanding. I really did. I kept my room clean, did my homework without being asked, and helped with Emma whenever they needed me. I thought if I was good enough, quiet enough, helpful enough, they'd remember I was their daughter too. When Emma started walking and talking, I thought things would get better. I imagined us becoming best friends, sharing secrets, and playing together like the sisters I saw on TV. I even decorated half of my room with welcome signs the day she was old enough to string full sentences together. "Want to play dolls with me, Emma?" I asked hopefully one afternoon. She looked at me with those calculating eyes that seemed too old for her 4-year-old face. "No, I want your dollhouse." "But that's mine. Grandma gave it to me for Christmas," I protested. Emma's response was to march straight to Dad and Linda, her face scrunching up in that familiar way that meant trouble for me. "Daddy, Chloe won't share her toys with me," she wailed, tears appearing on command. "Chloe," Dad's voice boomed from the kitchen. "Stop being selfish and let your sister play with your toys." That was just the beginning. Soon, Emma figured out she could take anything of mine she wanted. My art supplies, my books, even my clothes, nothing was off limits. When I tried to get them back, it always ended the same way. "Mom, Chloe's being mean again." "John, tell your daughter to stop bothering Emma." But the toy snatching was just the warm-up. Emma developed a talent for setting traps that would get me in trouble. Like the time she deliberately spilled juice on her new dress and told our parents I'd pushed her. Or when she broke her tablet and claimed I'd done it out of jealousy. Each time, I'd try to defend myself. "That's not what happened. She's lying." And each time, Dad would shake his head disapprovingly. "Stop trying to get attention, Chloe. Go to your room." My only refuge was at my grandparents' house. They saw through Emma's act and weren't afraid to say so. "John," Grandpa would say to Dad during Sunday dinners, his voice firm but tired, "you need to treat your daughters equally." "We do treat them equally," Linda would snap back. "But Chloe is just difficult. Always causing problems, always fighting with Emma. While Emma is such a sweet, well-behaved child." I'd sit there, pushing food around my plate, as Grandma's voice would rise. "Open your eyes. That sweet child of yours is manipulating everyone in this house. You're raising a little con artist, and you can't even see it." "Mother, please," Dad would try to intervene. You're being unfair to Emma. Unfair? Grandpa would scoff. What's unfair is watching you two spoil one child rotten while treating the other like she's invisible. That's what's unfair. But it was like talking to a wall. Dad and Linda had their narrative about their perfect younger daughter and their problematic older one, and nothing could shake it, not even the truth staring them in the face. Senior year should have been exciting, full of dreams about college and future plans. Instead, I found myself constantly worried about whether I'd even get to go. One night, as I was heading to the kitchen for a glass of water, I heard whispers that made me stop in my tracks. "John, it doesn't make sense." Linda's voice was hushed but intense. "The tuition money for Chloe, we could use it for Emma instead. Get her into that private high school she wants, and later, a better college." My heart stopped. They were talking about my college fund, the money Mom and Dad had started saving before I was even born. "I can't," Dad replied, his voice weak. "I promised Sarah. I promised her I'd make sure Chloe got an education." "Sarah's been dead for 14 years. Linda's whisper turned sharp. "You can't let promises to a dead woman control our lives forever. Emma deserves the best education we can give her." There was a long pause before Dad spoke again. "My parents would disinherit me if I did that. You know how they are about Chloe." My legs felt weak. So that was it. The only reason Dad was keeping his promise to Mom was fear of losing his inheritance. Not love for me, not respect for Mom's memory, just money. "Fine," Linda spat. "But I think it's ridiculous we're spending so much on her when Emma could use it better." I slipped back to my room without the water, my throat too tight to swallow anyway. Graduation came and went. I got accepted to the local college's graphic design program, which meant I could live at home and save money. Grandma and Grandpa surprised me with a top-of-the-line laptop at my graduation party. "This is for all those A's you earned, sweetheart," Grandpa said, hugging me tight. "You'll need it for your design work." I was over the moon. Finally, I had professional-grade equipment for my studies. But my excitement was tempered by transportation concerns. The campus was across town, and I hoped Dad might let me use his old Honda now that he had a new car. "Dad?" I approached him one evening. "About getting to college." "We can't afford another car, Chloe," he cut me off before I could finish. "The tuition payments are already stretching us thin. You'll have to take the bus." I nodded, swallowing my disappointment. But just 2 days later, I overheard them in the living room. "I think the red Mercedes would be perfect for Emma's Sweet 16, Linda was saying. "She'll be learning to drive soon, and it's such a safe car for a new driver." "Isn't it a bit expensive?" Dad asked, but I could hear the smile in his voice. "Only the best for our little princess," Linda replied. "We can start saving now, she'll be 16 before we know it." I stood there, my bus pass clutched in my hand, thinking about the hour-long commute I'd be making each way while they planned to buy my 14-year-old sister a luxury car. 2 years into college, life had fallen into a predictable routine of classes, bus rides, and trying to stay invisible at home. Then came the phone call that changed everything. "Chloe?" Grandma's voice sounded strained. "Could you come visit us this weekend? Your grandfather's had a bit of trouble with his heart, and we need to talk to you about something important." That Saturday, I found myself sitting in their familiar living room, the same place where I'd found refuge so many times during my childhood. Grandpa looked pale, but was sitting up in his armchair, Grandma perched on the armrest beside him. They exchanged a look I couldn't quite read, then Grandma took a deep breath. "Chloe, dear, we need to tell you something. After your grandfather's heart attack, we've done a lot of thinking about the future. We're getting old, sweetheart," Grandpa continued. "And maintaining this house is becoming too much for us. We've decided to move to Pine Grove Nursing Home." The tears came before I could stop them. But. Now, Grandma moved to sit beside me, pulling me into a hug that smelled of her signature lavender perfume, so similar to Mom's. "We'll have excellent care there. And you can visit anytime you want. I'll come every weekend, I promised through my tears. They both laughed, the sound warming the room. You most certainly will not, Grandpa declared. You're young. You should be out with friends, living your life, maybe meeting a nice boy. Then their faces grew serious again. Grandpa leaned forward in his chair. There's something else we need to tell you. We've spent about half our savings on securing our place at Pine Grove. The rest will go to the family after we're gone. I started to protest that I didn't want to talk about this, but he held up his hand. But the house, he continued, we've already taken care of that. We've registered it in your name, Chloe. This house belongs to you now. It's all legal and official. My head spun. Does Dad know? Grandpa's face hardened slightly. It's none of his business. This was our house to give, and we chose to give it to you. But, I looked around at the familiar walls, the photos spanning generations, the corner where I used to hide during hide and seek. Why? Because we're not blind, Grandma said softly. And we want to make sure you're taken care of. I sat there, stunned, looking at these two people who had always been my strongest supporters, who had seen me when everyone else looked past me. I won't tell them, I whispered, understanding instinctively that this needed to stay secret for now. Grandpa nodded approvingly. Good girl. What's done is done, and it's no one's business but ours. 2 weeks passed in a blur of helping Grandma and Grandpa move to Pine Grove. The day they handed Dad the keys to their house, I felt my stomach twist. He had no idea those keys weren't really his to take. This is wonderful, Linda gushed, already planning renovations in her head. No more rent. We can finally have a real family home. They wasted no time moving us in. I watched silently as Linda walked through each room, her nose wrinkling at the vintage furniture and familiar decorations that held so many of my childhood memories. This place needs a complete overhaul, she declared, running a finger along Grandma's antique sideboard. And a deep clean. For now, the girls can share the blue room upstairs, it's the only one properly habitable. My heart sank. Share a room with Emma? At 16, she'd become even more impossible than before. As if on cue, Emma's shrill voice filled the house. I am not sharing a room with her, she screamed, stamping her foot on Grandma's hardwood floors. This isn't fair. I deserve the master bedroom. Why should I be stuck with her? Make her sleep in the closet or the basement or whatever. I don't care. I stood there, clutching a box of my belongings, as Emma's tantrum escalated. The familiar headache that came with her screaming started to pulse behind my eyes. I hate this. I hate this house. I hate having to share anything with her. I'd learned long ago that there was no point in arguing. Without a word, I carried my box upstairs to the blue room, the same room where I used to sleep during weekend visits with Grandma and Grandpa. I set my laptop on the old desk by the window, placed a few books beside it, and left for my afternoon classes. The whole bus ride to campus, I tried to focus on my upcoming design project, but Emma's words kept echoing in my head. She'd gotten worse over the years, if that was possible. More entitled, more cruel, more calculating. When I returned that evening, the house was quiet. Dad and Linda's voices drifted up from the kitchen, but there was no sign of Emma. I climbed the stairs to our shared room, my footsteps silent on the carpet runner Grandma had installed years ago. The moment I opened the door, my world stopped. My laptop, my beautiful graduation gift from Grandma and Grandpa, my lifeline for my design work, lay shattered on the floor. The screen was cracked beyond repair, the case bent and broken. Emma sat on her bed, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips as she watched my face crumple. What did you do? My voice came out as a whisper, then rose to a shout. What did you do? Oops, she said, examining her perfectly manicured nails. Accidents happen. But go ahead, try telling them. We both know who they'll believe. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. I did it on purpose, and there's nothing you can do about it. Something inside me snapped. All the years of being pushed aside, ignored, gaslight, it all came rushing up like a tidal wave. Before I knew what I was doing, I lunged at Emma, my vision blurred with tears of rage. "You spoiled, entitled little brat," I screamed, grabbing her shoulders. She shrieked, not her usual calculated cry for attention, but a genuine sound of surprise. We tumbled onto the floor, years of pent-up frustration finally exploding. "Help! She's crazy! Help!" Emma screamed, while I kept shouting about all the times she'd destroyed my things, lied about me, made my life miserable. Dad and Linda burst into the room, Dad pulling me off Emma while Linda rushed to cradle her precious daughter. "Look!" I pointed at my shattered laptop, my voice breaking. "Look what she did. Grandma and Grandpa's graduation gift, she destroyed it on purpose." She admitted it. Emma's face transformed instantly, tears streaming down her cheeks as she clutched Linda. "It was an accident. I just bumped into the desk, I didn't mean to." And then she attacked me like a wild animal. "You evil, horrible girl." Linda shrieked at me, her face contorted with rage. "How dare you attack my daughter? John, I want her out of this house. Now. She's dangerous." I turned to Dad, desperately hoping he'd finally see through Emma's act. But his face was hard, closed off. "Pack your things," he said coldly. "And get out." The words hit me like physical blows. "Why?" I whispered, then found my voice. "Why do you always choose them? What happened to the dad who used to love me? Who promised Mom he'd take care of me?" His face reddened with anger. "Don't you dare bring your mother into this. You want to know the truth? You've been nothing but a burden since she died. A constant reminder of a past I wanted to forget. Linda and Emma are my real family now. You're just excess baggage we've been carrying around. You have 1 hour to leave my house." As he turned to leave, Emma's smug voice piped up. "I can finally have this room all to myself. I'm thinking pink walls, maybe a crystal chandelier." Linda joined in, already planning the renovation. "We'll get you new furniture, sweetheart. Make the space truly yours." Something shifted inside me at that moment. A lifetime of being pushed aside, of swallowing my words, of trying to be smaller, it all fell away. I stood up straighter, my voice clear and strong. "Actually, this isn't your house to renovate." They all turned to stare at me. "What are you talking about?" Linda snapped. With steady hands, I reached into my purse and pulled out the property documents Grandpa had given me. "This house belongs to me. Grandma and Grandpa transferred ownership to me before they moved to Pine Grove. If anyone's leaving, it's you three." The silence that followed was deafening. Dad snatched the papers from my hands, his face growing pale as he read. This can't be legal," Linda stuttered. "John, call your father right now." Dad's hands shook as he dialed Grandpa's number, putting it on speaker. "Dad, what is the meaning of this?" he demanded. Grandpa's voice was calm, almost amused. "I see Chloe's finally told you about the house. How could you do this to us?" Dad's voice cracked. "How could we do this?" Grandpa's voice turned hard. "How could you do what you've done to Chloe all these years? We watched you turn from a loving father into a spineless man who lets his wife and spoiled daughter walk all over him and abuse your firstborn child. Yes, we gave the house to Chloe. We knew this day would come, when you'd finally show your true colors." Dad started to respond with something angry, but Grandpa cut him off. "Choose your next words very carefully, son. One more disrespectful word, and you and your precious Emma lose your inheritance too. Your choice." I looked at the three shocked faces before me, my father, Linda, and Emma. They'd gone from righteous anger to stunned silence in the span of minutes. Now Linda was backpedaling fast. "Chloe, sweetie, we were just upset about the fight. We didn't really mean any of it. Of course we don't want you to leave. We were just joking." Her voice had that sickly sweet tone she used when trying to manipulate situations. "I have a really bad sense of humor," I replied, my voice steady. "So I'm going to take everything you said at face value. You have 1 week to find a new place and move out. I'll be staying at a hostel this week while you pack. I don't trust myself to be around any of you right now. Chloe, please, Dad started, but I cut him off. 1 week. After that, I'm changing the locks. I walked out of my grandparents' house, no, my house, that night with my head held high, even as tears streamed down my face. The hostel bed was uncomfortable, but it was better than staying under the same roof with people who'd just shown me exactly who they were. True to my word, they were out within the week. On moving day, they made one last attempt at reconciliation. "We're so sorry," Dad said, standing in the doorway with the last box. "We realize now how horrible we've been." Linda nodded frantically. "We never meant for things to go this far." Even Emma managed to look somewhat contrite, though she said nothing. I stood silently, watching them leave. Sometimes silence speaks louder than words. 3 months later, I sat in Grandpa and Grandma's room at Pine Grove, telling them everything that had happened since moving day. The afternoon sun streamed through the window as Grandma poured tea into delicate cups. She'd insisted on bringing her good china to the nursing home. "You did the right thing, standing up for yourself," Grandpa said, but his eyes were sad. "Though I hope someday you can all find a way to be family again." Grandma reached over and squeezed my hand. "But only when you're ready, dear. And only if they've truly changed." I nodded, telling them about my decision to rent out the house while I finished college. The rental income helped cover my expenses, and I'd found a small apartment closer to campus. I'd even been able to replace my laptop with the first month's rent. "Dad called yesterday," I said quietly, stirring my tea. "They're living in some rundown apartment complex on the edge of town." He apologized again, said they're struggling. "And how do you feel about that?" Grandma asked gently. "Honestly? Part of me feels guilty, but another part thinks they needed to experience consequences for once." I set my cup down. I told him I don't know if I'll ever be able to forgive them, or if I even want to try. "That's fair," Grandpa said. "Some wounds take a long time to heal. I'm graduating next semester with my degree in graphic design. I've already had some promising interviews with local agencies, and my portfolio is getting stronger every day. Sometimes I drive by the house and see the young family who's renting it now, their kids playing in the yard, lights glowing warmly in the windows at dusk. Maybe someday I'll move back in. Maybe someday I'll even be ready to have a relationship with Dad, Linda, and Emma again. But for now, I'm focused on building my own life, one where I don't have to make myself smaller to make room for anyone else. Looking back now, I should have seen the signs. But when you're in love, your heart has a way of glossing over the red flags your mind tries to wave at you. I'm Rose, and this is the story of how I met my husband and his family. David and I both worked at TechCore Solutions as software developers. He caught my eye right away, not just because he was handsome, but because he had this quiet confidence about him. Unlike some of our colleagues who lived and breathed code, David could actually hold a conversation about other things. "Hey, did you catch the new episode of Black Mirror last night?" he asked one morning, stopping by my desk with 2 cups of coffee. That was how it started, simple conversations about shared interests that grew into something more. We discovered we both loved sci-fi shows, hiking on weekends, and had the same terrible taste in B-movies. Our lunch breaks got longer, and our after-work quick coffees turned into dinner dates. Before I knew it, a year had passed, and David wanted me to meet his family. "They're really down to earth," he assured me as we drove to his mother's house. "Mom's excited to meet you, and my sister Sarah lives there too, with her husband Mike and their son Tommy." The house was modest but well kept, with toys scattered across the front yard. Sarah opened the door before we could knock, bouncing her 4-year-old on her hip. "Finally," she exclaimed, pulling David into a hug. "Mom, they're here." Linda, David's mother, appeared from the kitchen wearing an apron and a warm smile. "There's my successful son," she beamed, hugging him tight before turning to me. "And this must be Rose. David's told us so much about you." During dinner, I watched how they interacted. They seemed like a normal family, clearly proud of David's achievements at work. But something felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it until Sarah started talking about Tommy's upcoming birthday. "David," she said, giving him her best puppy dog eyes, "Tommy's been begging for that new Nintendo game." "The one with the dinosaurs?" "Sarah," David started, but his mother jumped in. "Oh, let him spoil his nephew a little. You're doing so well at that fancy tech company," Linda laughed, patting David's hand. Then she turned to me with what seemed like a light-hearted smile. "I just hope after the wedding, he won't forget he has a mother and sister to take care of too." I smiled politely, thinking she was joking. Everyone laughed, and the conversation moved on. I didn't realize then that her words weren't actually a joke at all. 6 months later, David and I got married in a small ceremony. We found a nice apartment for rent near our office, and I thought we were starting our life together perfectly. The honeymoon phase of our marriage didn't last long, literally. We'd barely unpacked our suitcases from our actual honeymoon when the requests started rolling in. First, it was Sarah calling about Tommy's school supplies. Then Linda needed help with some home repairs. The requests were endless, and each time, David would pull out his wallet without hesitation. At first, I tried to ignore it. The amounts weren't huge, and David made good money at TechCore. But it started to feel like death by 1,000 cuts, $100 here, $200 there. Every week brought a new emergency that only David could solve. One night, after Sarah called about needing money for Tommy's new winter clothes, I decided it was time for a conversation. I waited until David and I were doing the dishes together, our nightly routine. "Hun," I started, carefully choosing my words, "can we talk about something?" He looked at me, soap suds up to his elbows. "Sure, what's up?" "It's about the money, for your family." I saw his shoulders tense slightly. "Don't you think it's becoming a bit excessive?" David's face flushed with embarrassment as he dried his hands. I know. I'm just used to helping them out. I've been doing it since I got my first job." "But your mom has a good pension," I pointed out gently. "And Sarah has Mike, shouldn't he be providing for his own family?" David let out a long sigh and leaned against the counter. "Mike, well, he hasn't actually worked in over a year." "What?" I nearly dropped the plate I was drying. "Why not?" "He keeps quitting. Every job he gets, there's always something wrong. The work is too hard, the boss is unreasonable, the commute is too long." David ran his fingers through his hair in frustration. "There's always an excuse." I set down the dish towel and turned to face my husband. "David, I love how much you care about your family. But we need to think about our future too. We want to buy a house someday, right? Have our own children?" "Of course," he nodded. "Then we need to start prioritizing our own family," I said softly, taking his hand. "Supporting your mom and sister is kind, but we can't keep doing it at the expense of our own dreams." David was quiet for a long moment, absently playing with my fingers. Finally, he looked up. "You're right. We should be saving for our future. What if we set up a separate savings account specifically for the house? We can put a fixed amount in there every month, no touching it for any reason." "That sounds perfect," I smiled, relieved he understood. We spent the rest of the evening planning our savings strategy, and for the first time since our wedding, I felt like we were truly on the same page about our future. 2 months into our new savings plan, Linda invited us over for Sunday dinner. I had a nagging feeling about it, but David insisted we should go. "They're still family," he said, squeezing my hand as we drove over. The tension was palpable from the moment we walked in. Sarah was setting the table, her movements sharp and angry. Mike was sprawled on the couch, scrolling through his phone. Linda's smile seemed forced as she hugged David, barely acknowledging my presence. The first 20 minutes of dinner were filled with awkward small talk about the weather and Linda's garden. I pushed my meatloaf around the plate, waiting for the other shoe to drop. It didn't take long. David, honey, Linda began, her voice dripping with sweetness, I noticed you haven't sent any money for the past 2 months. Is everything okay at work? The clinking of forks against plates stopped. I could feel everyone's eyes on us. David cleared his throat, and I saw him straighten his shoulders, something he always did when he was nervous. Actually, Mom, he said, his voice steady but quiet, Rose and I are saving up to buy a house. We want to start our own family soon. The silence that followed was deafening. Linda's fork clattered against her plate as she set it down, her eyes boring into me. Sarah's face turned red, and I could see the storm brewing. A house? Sarah's voice cracked. While I'm here pregnant with my second child, barely able to afford prenatal vitamins? Do you know how expensive baby things are these days? I felt my blood begin to boil. 2 months of biting my tongue, and I couldn't hold back anymore. Maybe your husband should think about that, I said, nodding toward Mike, who was still somehow managing to check his phone under the table. Sarah's face crumpled. How dare you? You're so cruel. The tears started flowing, right on cue. You don't understand our situation. Mike finally looked up from his phone. Hey, I'm trying here. Do you know how hard it is to find a good job in this economy? I'm dealing with depression, you know. Something in me snapped. Depression didn't stop you from having another baby, did it? The room exploded. Sarah wailed louder. Mike started defending himself about his job search, but Linda's voice rose above them all. You, she pointed her finger at me, face contorted with rage. You're trying to turn my son against his own family. We were happy before you came along with your selfish ideas. Selfish? I stood up so quickly, my chair scraped against the floor. Wanting to build a future with my husband is selfish? Mom, stop, David tried to interrupt, but Linda was on a roll. She's poisoning your mind against us. Your own mother and sister. How dare she tell us we can't have help from our own family? I couldn't take any more. Without a word, I grabbed my purse and walked out. David followed close behind, and we got into the car in silence. The sound of Linda's shout still echoed from the house as we pulled away. The drive home was painfully quiet. I watched the street lights flash by, fighting back tears of frustration. Finally, as we pulled into our apartment complex, David spoke. You were right, he said softly. About everything. But maybe we need to be more gentle with them. They're not going to change overnight. I turned to look at him, saw the conflict written all over his face. Part of me wanted to argue that his family didn't deserve gentleness, that they needed a reality check. But looking at my husband's pained expression, I just nodded. The aftermath of our dinner confrontation played out in the most modern way possible, on social media. Sarah began posting daily updates that made my blood boil. Struggling to afford prenatal vitamins for my baby. Pregnant and broke, family struggle, one post read. Another showed an empty shopping cart, having to cut back on groceries this month. Sometimes I wonder how we'll manage with another little one on the way. The posts kept coming, each one more dramatic than the last. Pictures of Tommy looking sad beside empty toy store windows, long paragraphs about the importance of family support, pointed comments about some people having their priorities wrong. I caught David checking his phone constantly, his face getting more strained with each notification. One evening, after he'd been particularly quiet, I found him staring at a photo Sarah had posted of Tommy's worn-out shoes. You can send her something, I said softly, touching his shoulder. Small amounts. Just, let's keep our savings plan intact. The relief on his face was immediate. So David started sending Sarah a modest monthly amount again. Like magic, the tragic social media posts decreased, though they never completely stopped. Linda began extending dinner invitations once more, though the atmosphere was far from warm. Would you like more potatoes, David? Linda would ask warmly, then slide her eyes past me as if I were invisible. Sarah would only address her brother, speaking about me in the third person even when I sat right there. I wonder if your wife would mind passing the salt, she'd say, staring at the ceiling. I took it all in stride. Because while they were busy giving me the cold shoulder, something amazing was happening at work. TechCore landed a massive contract with Global Tech, one of the biggest names in the industry. David and I had both been instrumental in securing the deal, and our compensation reflected that. Suddenly, our combined income nearly doubled. Our savings account grew faster than we'd ever dreamed possible. We kept living modestly, but allowed ourselves a few luxuries: a new hybrid SUV to replace David's struggling sedan, a weekend trip to the coast here and there. As our bank account grew, so did our dreams. We started looking at real estate listings, discussing neighborhoods, planning for our future. For the first time since our wedding, I felt like we were truly moving forward. It was during one of our now tense family dinners that Linda dropped her latest bomb. I was quietly eating my pot roast, trying to ignore the usual cold shoulders, when she cleared her throat dramatically. "I saw your vacation photos on Facebook," she announced, fixing me with an icy stare. "Palm Springs, wasn't it? That resort looked expensive." I felt David tense beside me. Here we go again, I thought. "Those infinity pools, luxury spa treatments," Linda continued, her voice dripping with disapproval. "Really, David, I don't think it's appropriate to flaunt such a luxurious lifestyle when your sister can barely make ends meet with 2 children." The irony of her statement wasn't lost on me. As she spoke, the clicking of computer keys provided a steady background rhythm. Mike sat at the desk in the corner, completely absorbed in his newest video game, the 3rd new release he'd bought this month, by my count. I couldn't help myself. "Speaking of making ends meet," I said, gesturing toward Mike, "there are plenty of job openings in tech support at our company. The pay is good, and the benefits are excellent." The clicking stopped for a moment, then resumed even louder. Sarah's face turned that familiar shade of red. "You have no idea what it's like," she snapped. "Try being a mother of 2 before you judge us." "Oh wait, you wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" The barb stung, but I kept my face neutral. Mike continued playing his game, apparently oblivious to the tension in the room. Or maybe he just didn't care. I could have pointed out that being a mother was Sarah's choice, just like having a second child while unemployed was their choice. I could have mentioned that the cost of Mike's gaming habit could probably cover those prenatal vitamins she was always complaining about on Facebook. I could have started another fight. Instead, I just shook my head and took another bite of pot roast. Later that night, as David and I drove home, I thought about the monthly transfers he still made to his sister's account. The amount wasn't small, it could have furnished an entire room in our future house, but our new salaries meant we could handle it without derailing our plans. Sometimes keeping the peace came with a price tag, and for now, we could afford it. Meanwhile, Sarah's demands evolved from subtle hints to full-blown gift registries. Every holiday, Christmas, Easter, birthdays, Mother's Day, yes, she expected gifts from her brother for Mother's Day, came with a detailed list of expensive items she needed for herself and the kids. "David, look at this," I said one evening, showing him the latest email from his sister. It was a Christmas list that included designer clothes, the latest iPad, and premium toys that cost more than our monthly car payment. David sighed, running his hands through his hair. "I'll talk to her. This is getting ridiculous." But when he called Sarah to explain that he was already helping with monthly support, the waterworks started immediately. I could hear her shrill voice through the phone, "I'll tell Mom. You care more about your wife's feelings than your own family's needs." After watching David struggle through 3 such conversations, I'd had enough. While he was in the shower one evening, I opened Sarah's latest gift requirements email and started editing. The $800 designer purse became a $400 alternative. The $1,000 iPad became a $500 tablet. Every item, cut exactly in half. "Here," I said, showing David my revised list. "This is what we're doing." He looked uncertain. "Sarah won't be happy." "Sarah's never happy," I pointed out. "But this is still generous." When the gifts were delivered, the reaction was exactly what I expected. Sarah called David in tears, and Linda left a scathing voicemail about cheap knockoffs. At the next family dinner, they both shot daggers at me with their eyes. I just don't understand why you couldn't get the items I specifically requested, Sarah sniffed. I gave her my sweetest smile. Oh, but didn't you know? It's not about the price tag, it's the thought that counts. We put a lot of thought into choosing these alternatives. The look she gave me could have curdled milk. A year passed in this strange dance of passive-aggressive gift-giving and tense family dinners. Then came the Easter gathering that would change everything. Sarah waited until everyone was seated at the table, then stood up with what she clearly thought was a radiant expression. "I have wonderful news," she announced. "We're expecting baby number 3. The fork stopped halfway to my mouth. I felt David stiffen beside me. A 3rd child? With no income? No home of their own? My mind spun with calculations of how much more this would add to our monthly family support payments. Mike, predictably, didn't look up from his phone. Linda, however, was ecstatic. "Oh, my darling," she cried, hugging Sarah. "This is wonderful news. 3 beautiful grandchildren." Then she turned to me, her eyes glittering with malice. "You should take notes, Rose. Sarah's such a wonderful example of a real woman. Here she is, about to have her 3rd child, while you still haven't given David any." The room went quiet. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, waiting for my reaction. I set down my fork carefully, making sure my voice was steady when I spoke. "I believe in doing things in the right order," I said coolly. "First, build a stable foundation, like having our own home and being able to provide for our children without depending on handouts. Then, start a family." Linda and Sarah exchanged looks, before breaking into artificial laughter. "Oh, Rose," Linda said condescendingly, "you're so corporate. Family isn't about money and houses." "No," I agreed, taking a sip of water. "It's about responsibility." The tension around the table was thick enough to cut with a knife, but I didn't care anymore. Let them laugh. Let them think I was cold and calculating. At least my future children would have a roof over their heads that nobody could take away. Sarah's 3rd baby arrived in September, another boy. Meanwhile, David and I had reached our savings goal. After months of house hunting, we finally found it, our perfect home. A beautiful 2-story colonial with 4 bedrooms, a spacious backyard, and a kitchen that made me want to learn to cook properly. It was in an excellent school district, just a 20-minute drive from work. We spent weeks planning renovations, picking paint colors, and choosing furniture. Every room held a promise: the sunny bedroom that would make a perfect nursery, the basement we could turn into a playroom, the office space where we could work from home when needed. Then came the dinner invitation from Linda. "Mom wants us to come over tonight," David said, checking his phone. "She says it's important." Something felt off about the invitation, but I couldn't put my finger on what. When we arrived, everyone was there: Linda, Sarah, Mike, and all 3 kids. They had this strange, almost smug energy about them. Sarah was practically bouncing in her seat, while Linda wore the self-satisfied smile I'd learned to dread. "So," Linda began after we'd settled in, "I hear congratulations are in order. You bought a house?" I nodded, still riding the high of our achievement. "Yes, we just closed last week. It's perfect for..." "Well," Linda cut me off, "that's actually what we wanted to discuss." She folded her hands on the table, like a business executive about to close a deal. "You and David are still young, no children yet. You can continue living in your apartment just fine." I felt my smile freeze. What was she getting at? "But Sarah, my poor girl, has 3 beautiful children, cramped up in this house. They need space to grow, a yard to play in." Linda's voice dripped with false concern. "So, we've decided that you should give your new house to Sarah and her family." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. But Linda's face remained serious. Sarah was nodding enthusiastically, while Mike finally looked up from his phone, showing interest for the first time in months. "I'm sorry, what?" I managed to say, looking between them. You want us to give away our house? The house we spent years saving for? Sarah leaned forward. I'm a mother of 3, she said, as if that explained everything. I have a right to provide my children with proper living conditions. You can always buy another house later. I turned to David, my heart pounding. Are you hearing this? Do you finally see how entitled they are? But before David could respond, Linda's smile widened. Oh, sweetie, she said, her voice sickly sweet. I raised my son right. He knows where his loyalties lie, with his mother and sister. Isn't that right, David? Bang! David's fist came down on the table so hard the dishes rattled. He shot up from his chair, his face flushed with anger I'd never seen before. Linda and Sarah actually flinched, their smug expressions dissolving into shock. That's enough, David's voice boomed through the room. Even Mike dropped his phone. I have sat here for years watching you manipulate and guilt me. I've supported you financially, emotionally, constantly. I've given you money while you, he pointed at Mike, sit around playing video games all day. I've listened to you insult my wife, belittle our choices, and demand more and more. Sarah opened her mouth to speak, but David cut her off. No, you don't get to talk right now. Do you have any idea how much money I've given you over the years? Thousands upon thousands of dollars. And now you have the audacity to demand our house? Linda tried to interject, David, sweetie. Don't sweetie me, Mom. You think you raised me right? Teaching me that it's okay to leech off relatives? That it's acceptable to demand they give up their home? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. You know what? You actually did raise me right enough to finally see how toxic this all is. He grabbed my hand, pulling me up from my chair. We're done. All of this? It's over. No more money, no more gifts, no more manipulation. Find someone else to be your ATM. But the children, Sarah started crying. Should be your and Mike's responsibility, David shouted. Not mine, not Rose's. Yours. Still holding my hand, he pulled me toward the door. Don't call us. Don't text us. Don't send us your lists of demands. We're done. The last thing I saw as we left was their stunned faces, frozen in disbelief. David practically ran to the car, helping me in before jumping into the driver's seat. As we pulled away from the curb, I couldn't help myself. I grabbed his face and kissed him hard. I love you, I whispered against his lips. I'm so proud of you. He hugged me tight, and I felt him trembling slightly. I should have done that years ago. I'm sorry it took me so long to stand up to them. The next few weeks were a hurricane of desperate attempts at contact. Linda called constantly, alternating between tears and threats. Sarah sent lengthy texts about how we were destroying her family. Flying monkeys in the form of distant relatives called to tell us how cruel we were being. But David stood firm. He blocked their numbers, unfriended them on social media, and we focused on making our new house a home. We painted walls, bought furniture, and started planting a garden. Each day that passed, I watched the weight of his family's manipulation lift from his shoulders. One morning, as we sat in our beautiful kitchen, drinking coffee and planning to convert one of the bedrooms into a nursery, David reached across the table and took my hand. Thank you, he said simply. For helping me find my spine. For showing me what real family should be like. For being patient while I figured it all out. As I write this, sitting in our cozy living room, I can't help but smile. Sometimes the family you're born into isn't the family you deserve. Sometimes you have to build your own. And that's exactly what we're doing, one day, one room, one dream at a time. The nursery paint samples are spread out on the coffee table in front of me, and tomorrow we have our first appointment with the fertility specialist. Life isn't perfect, but it's ours. And that's all that matters. My name is Brittany, and I was working in the marketing department at Carson and Associates when our paths crossed. David worked in sales, just down the hall from my office. It started innocently enough. We kept running into each other in the office kitchen during lunch breaks. I'd heat up my sad microwave meals while he'd unpack his perfectly organized bento boxes. "Those look way better than my frozen dinners," I said one day, eyeing his colorful lunch spread. He grinned and pulled out an extra set of chopsticks. "Want to try?" My mom taught me how to cook, though I'm pretty sure she regrets it now. I stopped falling for her special recipes pretty quickly. That first shared lunch turned into daily lunch dates. We'd sit at the small table by the window, trading stories about our lives. I told him about growing up with my sensible parents in the suburbs, about my grandmother who'd gifted me my apartment before she passed away. He talked about his work, his hobbies, his dreams, but rarely about his family. After 3 months of lunches, he finally asked me out properly. "Dinner tonight? Somewhere that doesn't have a microwave or plastic cutlery?" I said yes, and that's how our real story began. We dated for a year, and it was wonderful. David was thoughtful, funny, and kind. When he suggested moving in together, it made perfect sense. My apartment had plenty of space, and we were spending most nights together anyway. Everything was perfect, except for one thing: I'd never met his family. He'd met mine within the first few months of dating. But whenever I brought up meeting his family, David would change the subject or make vague excuses. One night, after we'd been living together for a few months, I finally confronted him about it. We were curled up on the couch, watching a movie, when I paused it and turned to face him. "David, why haven't I met your family yet? Are you ashamed of me or something?" He let out a heavy sigh, running his hands through his dark hair. "God, no, Britt. I'm not ashamed of you, I'm ashamed of them." I laughed, thinking he was joking. "Come on, they can't be that bad." "They are." His voice was dead serious. "They're different. They think everything is a joke, and I mean everything. Even important moments, serious situations, they turn everything into some kind of cruel prank." I remember raising my eyebrows, still not quite believing him. "What do you mean? You want examples? Fine." He sat up straighter, his jaw tense. "When I was in high school, I had my first girlfriend over for dinner. My mom served spaghetti, but she'd replaced the noodles with rubber worms. My date screamed and threw up at the table. Everyone thought it was hilarious, except me and Sarah. She never spoke to me again." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. But there wasn't one. "Or how about when I had a big presentation in middle school? My brother replaced my notebook with an identical one filled with pornographic drawings. When I opened it in front of the class." He shook his head. "I got suspended for 2 weeks." As he continued sharing stories from his childhood, each one worse than the last, I began to understand why he'd been so hesitant to introduce me to his family. But I had no idea that I was about to become their next target. David proposed on a Tuesday. Nothing fancy, just the two of us in our kitchen, making breakfast. He pulled out a ring while I was flipping pancakes, and said, "I can't imagine my life without you, Britt. Will you marry me?" Of course, I said yes. And then, inevitably, came the words I'd been both dreading and curious about: "I guess it's time for you to meet my family." The Thompson family home was a charming 2-story colonial in the suburbs. Mrs. Thompson opened the door before we even reached the porch. She was a petite woman with David's warm brown eyes and a wide smile. Mr. Thompson stood behind her, tall and distinguished looking, and next to him was James, David's older brother. "Oh, finally!" Mrs. Thompson pulled me into a tight hug. We'd been dying to meet the woman who stole our David's heart. The initial conversation was surprisingly normal. We sat in their cozy living room, and they asked about my job, my family, how David and I met. They even cracked a few harmless jokes that made me laugh. I started to relax, thinking David had exaggerated their pranking tendencies. I caught him watching his family warily, like someone waiting for a bomb to explode. I thought he was being paranoid. "I'll get us some tea," Mrs. Thompson announced cheerfully. "Brittany, dear, how do you take yours?" "Just a splash of milk, please." When she returned with the tea tray, everyone was still chatting pleasantly. I took a big sip of my tea and immediately regretted it. My mouth exploded with salt and pepper, so much pepper it felt like I'd swallowed fire. I spat the tea back into the cup, but it was too late. My throat was burning. Tears streamed down my face as I coughed and gasped. The Thompsons burst into laughter. "Welcome to the family," James hooted. "Better get used to it, we love our little jokes." "That's how we show love here," Mr. Thompson added, wiping tears of laughter from his eyes. I ran to the kitchen, desperately searching for water. I found a glass and filled it with ice and water, drinking it in huge gulps. The pepper had made my nose run, and I could feel my carefully applied makeup streaming down my face along with my tears. From the living room, I could hear David's angry whispers, "What is wrong with you people? This isn't funny. She's going to be my wife." "Oh, lighten up," James replied. "It's just a joke." When I walked back into the living room, my face a mess of running mascara and smeared foundation, they took one look at me and started laughing again. "Look, she looks like a panda," James pointed at me, doubling over with laughter. That was the last straw for David. He jumped to his feet, his face red with anger. "You're all jerks. This is exactly why I didn't want to bring her here." He grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the door. In the car, David apologized over and over. I just hugged him, my face still burning from the pepper and humiliation. As we drove home, I realized David hadn't been exaggerating about his family at all. He'd been warning me. Planning a wedding is stressful enough, without having to worry about your future in-laws turning it into a practical joke playground. David and I spent weeks debating whether to invite his family at all. "We have to invite them," David finally said one night while we were addressing invitations. "They're still my parents, and no matter how much I hate their pranks, I'd regret not having them there." He called them the next day, putting the phone on speaker so I could hear. "Mom, Dad, listen carefully," his voice was stern. "You can come to the wedding, but I need your word, no pranks. This is the most important day of our lives, not a circus." "Of course, sweetheart," his mother chirped. "We'll behave, I promise." The day of the wedding started perfectly. The ceremony was beautiful, and during the reception, everything was going smoothly. David's family was actually behaving themselves, though I noticed David watching them like a hawk. Then came time for the cake cutting. Our cake was gorgeous, 4 tiers of white fondant with delicate sugar flowers cascading down the sides. But something was off. There were candles on it, lit candles. That wasn't part of our plan. I turned to David to mention it, but before I could get the words out, there was a loud pop. Then another, and another. The cake suddenly exploded, sending chunks of white cake and frosting flying everywhere. Most of it landed on me, completely ruining my wedding dress. For a moment, there was complete silence. Then I heard it, the familiar sound of the Thompsons' laughter. They were practically falling over themselves, pointing and howling with glee. "Your face," James gasped between laughs. "Oh my God, your face." I stood there, cake dripping down my dress, and burst into tears. Through my blurred vision, I saw David's face turn purple with rage. "Get out," he roared at his family. "Get out of my wedding right now." "You're overreacting," his mother said, looking bewildered. "Everyone loves a good wedding prank." David didn't respond. Instead, he waved over the security team we'd hired, thank God for that decision, and had them escort his family out. My mother rushed over with napkins, trying to clean frosting off my face. My bridesmaids surrounded me protectively. Even David's Aunt Clara, who I'd just met that day, came over to help, shooting disgusted looks at her departing relatives. "I can't believe they're my brother's family," she muttered, helping to wipe cake from my hair. "This is a wedding, for heaven's sake, not a college fraternity party." Somehow, we salvaged the rest of the reception. Our friends and my family rallied around us, turning it into a joke we were all in on, rather than one at my expense. Someone found a backup cake. Apparently, our wedding planner had dealt with difficult families before, and we even managed to get some decent pictures taken after I changed into my backup dress. Life settled into a peaceful rhythm after the wedding disaster. David and I enjoyed our quiet existence in my grandmother's old apartment, far from his family's chaos. We transformed the spare bedroom into a home office, planning to use it that way for a few years, before maybe turning it into a nursery. But plans change. Just over a year after our wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. David was overjoyed, spinning me around our kitchen when I told him, though he quickly put me down when I turned green. We decided to keep it to ourselves for the first few months, telling only my parents. Somehow, though, news travels. I was 7 months along when David's phone rang one evening. "Your mother?" I asked, recognizing his expression. He nodded. "They know about the baby. Mom's insisting they have a right to meet their grandchild." I instinctively put my hands over my swollen belly. "No pranks around the baby," I said firmly. "Absolutely none," David agreed before answering the phone. When Emma was born, she was perfect, 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and David's warm brown eyes. We managed to keep the Thompsons away for the first 2 months, but their persistence wore us down. Just one visit, David negotiated with them. At our apartment, where we control the environment. And if there's even a hint of a prank, you're out forever. They came on a Sunday afternoon. I watched them like a hawk as they cooed over Emma, looking for any sign of mischief. But they were surprisingly normal. Mrs. Thompson cradled Emma gently, tears in her eyes. Mr. Thompson proudly showed us pictures of his own father holding David as a baby. That visit led to others. They'd come over every few weeks, bringing appropriate gifts and behaving themselves. Still, I never fully relaxed around them. I refused every dinner invitation, remembering the pepper tea incident all too well. During one of their visits, while David was changing Emma's diaper, Mrs. Thompson started chatting about James. "Oh, he got married last month," she mentioned casually. "Such a small ceremony. Just at the courthouse. His Caroline refused to have a proper wedding." She shook her head disapprovingly. "I don't understand why." I bit my tongue to keep from saying, "Really? You don't understand why?" Instead, I just nodded, thinking about my own ruined wedding dress and exploding cake. I had a pretty good idea why Caroline opted for a courthouse ceremony, and honestly, I wished I'd done the same. In my head, I could imagine exactly how that conversation had gone between James and Caroline. She'd probably heard the stories about my wedding, or maybe she'd been subject to a few harmless pranks herself. Either way, smart girl, she'd found a way to avoid giving them any opportunity for their special brand of humor. Life has a way of shattering when you least expect it. One rainy Tuesday morning, David kissed Emma goodbye before school, kissed me goodbye before work, and walked out our door for the last time. A drunk driver ran a red light at 9:17 a.m. By 9:20, I was a widow. Emma didn't understand at first. She was only 7, too young to fully grasp the concept of never coming back. When I told her Daddy had died, she asked if he'd be home for dinner. Each time she asked, my heart broke all over again. The days leading up to the funeral passed in a blur. My mother practically moved in, handling arrangements, while I sat in a daze on the couch, holding Emma. I couldn't cry anymore. I felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me. The Thompsons came to the funeral with James and his wife Caroline. I barely registered their presence until it was time for the eulogies. I'd already spoken, sharing memories of David as a husband and father, his kindness, his gentle humor, how he'd taught Emma to ride her bike just last month. Then his parents stood up to speak. "David always loved a good joke," Mr. Thompson began, and I felt my stomach clench. "Remember when he was 5, and we convinced him his teddy bear had come alive and eaten all his Halloween candy?" Mrs. Thompson chimed in with a laugh. Or that time in college when we sent him a fake acceptance letter to medical school, even though he never applied? His face was priceless. The church was silent. No one laughed. I looked around and saw faces twisted in disbelief and secondhand embarrassment. Emma clutched my hand, confused. And now he's up there, Mr. Thompson continued, grinning, probably planning the ultimate prank on St. Peter. I felt something snap inside me. My whole body started shaking with rage. Emma must have felt it because she looked up at me with worried eyes. After the service, while people were gathering for the reception, I approached the Thompsons. My voice was quiet but sharp enough to cut glass. "How dare you?" I hissed. "How dare you turn my husband's funeral into a joke?" "Oh, Brittany," Mrs. Thompson reached for my arm. David would have appreciated the humor. He always did. I jerked away from her touch. No, he tolerated it. What you do is cruel and thoughtless. I never want to see any of you again. You're not welcome in our lives anymore. Emma and I are done with all of you. But we're family, Mrs. Thompson protested, finally looking concerned. No, I said firmly. We're not. Family doesn't humiliate each other. Family doesn't ruin weddings or mock funerals. We're done. I turned and walked away, leaving them standing there, probably still wondering what they'd done wrong. They'd never understood, and they never would. 5 years passed like a blur. Emma grew from a grieving 7-year-old into a thoughtful 12-year-old who had her father's kind eyes and gentle spirit. I threw myself into being both mother and father, trying to fill the David-shaped hole in our lives. We heard bits and pieces about the Thompsons through the grapevine. James had 2 kids now. I'd seen pictures on social media of 2 boys with his mischievous grin. I always quickly scrolled past, determined to keep that chapter of our lives firmly closed. Sometimes Emma would ask about them, especially around holidays or when her friends talked about their grandparents. I never told her about the exploding wedding cake or the funeral jokes. She had enough complicated feelings about losing her dad without adding that mess to it. Then came the phone call, 3 days before Christmas. "Brittany?" Mrs. Thompson's voice was older, softer somehow. "Please don't hang up." I almost did anyway, but Emma was sitting next to me on the couch, working on her homework. She looked up, curious. "We miss Emma," Mrs. Thompson continued. "And you. Please, would you consider spending Christmas with us? The whole family will be there, James and Caroline, their boys. We'd love to see you both." I started to say no, but Emma, who had obviously figured out who was calling, began nodding enthusiastically. Her eyes were pleading. "There will be absolutely no pranks," I said firmly. "No jokes, no tricks, nothing like that. Just a normal Christmas dinner." "We promise," Mr. Thompson's voice joined in. They must have been on speakerphone. "We swear on David's memory. No pranks." Maybe it was the mention of David, or maybe it was Emma's hopeful face, but I found myself agreeing. "We'll come," I said. "But I mean it about the pranks." After hanging up, Emma and I went shopping. If we were doing this, we were doing it right. We picked out top-of-the-line kitchen appliances for the Thompsons, the latest tablet for James and Caroline, and the season's hottest toys for their boys. "Do you think Grandma and Grandpa got me something nice?" Emma asked as we wrapped the gifts. "I'm sure they did, sweetheart," I said, hoping I wasn't lying. "They've had 5 years to think about it." Emma threw herself into choosing wrapping paper and writing cards. I watched her excitement grow and prayed I wasn't making a horrible mistake by letting the Thompsons back into our lives. The Thompson house looked exactly the same as I remembered it, decorated with twinkling Christmas lights and a wreath on the door. Emma squeezed my hand as we walked up the path, our arms full of carefully wrapped presents. James and his family were already there when we arrived. His wife Caroline gave me a warm, almost apologetic smile as she helped us with our coats. Their boys, Mike and Tommy, hovered shyly behind their parents. The gift-giving started promisingly. Emma and I handed out our presents, and the reactions seemed genuine. Mrs. Thompson teared up over the expensive coffee maker. Mr. Thompson was thrilled with his new tablet, and the boys' faces lit up at their gaming consoles. Then came our turn. Mrs. Thompson handed Emma a wrapped box with a big smile, while Mr. Thompson passed me a similar one. Emma's fingers trembled slightly as she unwrapped hers, her first gift from her grandparents in 5 years. I'll never forget the look on her face when she opened that box. Inside was a plastic toy designed to look like dog poop, along with some clearly marked down items from the clearance bin. Emma's lower lip quivered as she stared at the contents. The laughter started immediately. Mr. Thompson and James were practically howling. Even the boys joined in, pointing at Emma's face. "Oh my God, look at them," James gasped between laughs. "Their expressions are priceless." My own box contained similar junk, expired candy, and items that still had clearance stickers on them. "That's enough," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "Where are the real presents?" Mrs. Thompson wiped tears of laughter from her eyes. "What do you mean? Those are the presents." "You can't be serious." I looked at each of them. "You haven't seen your granddaughter in 5 years, and you give her fake dog poop as a Christmas present?" They exchanged confused looks. "It's funny," Mr. Thompson insisted. "Come on, Brittany, learn to take a joke." I watched a tear roll down Emma's cheek, and something snapped inside me. Without a word, I stood up and walked over to Mike and Tommy. "I'm sorry, boys," I said, taking back the gaming consoles. "But these are returning to the store." "Mom," they wailed as I moved on to James and Caroline, collecting the tablet and other gifts. "Brittany, this is cruel," Mrs. Thompson protested as I took back their presents too. "Cruel?" I turned on her. "You gave a 12-year-old girl who lost her father fake dog poop for Christmas, and you're calling me cruel?" "It was just a joke," James started, but I cut him off. "We're leaving, Emma," I said. "Get your coat." The drive home was quiet. Emma stared out the window, clutching her empty gift bag. "I'm sorry, sweetheart," I finally said. "I really thought they'd changed." "It's okay, Mom," she replied softly. "Can we watch Christmas movies and make hot chocolate when we get home?" "Of course we can. We'll have our own Christmas, just us two." And that's exactly what we did. We spent the rest of Christmas Day in our pajamas, watching holiday movies, baking cookies, and trying to forget about the Thompsons and their idea of humor. The day after Christmas, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw James's post. "Terrible Christmas yesterday. My sister-in-law showed her true colors, cruelly taking back Christmas presents from my crying children. Some people just don't understand family traditions and humor. My poor boys were heartbroken. Bad aunt, Christmas ruined." The comments flooded in immediately. "How horrible. What kind of person takes presents from children? She sounds toxic." My hands were shaking as I typed my response. "Let me tell you what really happened at Christmas yesterday." "You want to talk about cruel? Let me tell you about your family traditions. After 5 years of no contact, your parents gave their only granddaughter, a 12-year-old girl who lost her father, a toy that mimics dog feces as a Christmas present. They gave me clearance bin items with price tags still attached. Then they laughed at our pain. But this isn't new behavior. Let me tell you all about my wedding day, where they rigged our wedding cake to explode in my face. Or about my husband's funeral, where they thought it was appropriate to turn their son's eulogy into a stand-up comedy routine about pranking him as a child. You want to talk about toxic family traditions? Let's talk." I hit post and waited. Within minutes, other relatives started chiming in. "Oh God, remember Cousin Sarah's graduation? They replaced her diploma with a joke certificate during the photo op. They put laxatives in the punch at my baby shower. They ruined my son's bar mitzvah with that trick Torah scroll." The tide turned quickly. Soon, James's original post was flooded with people sharing their own stories of the Thompsons' pranks. Caroline, James's wife, even liked several of the comments. The phone call started that evening. First James. Brittany, I never thought about it like that. Reading everyone's stories. God, we've been awful, haven't we? Then Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. We never meant to hurt anyone, Mrs. Thompson said, her voice shaking. We thought everyone was laughing with us. We thought it was all in good fun. We've always been this way, Mr. Thompson added. It's how we show love. But maybe we'd been showing it wrong. I took a deep breath. You have to understand, your pranks aren't funny. They're cruel. They hurt people. They hurt your granddaughter. We see that now, Mrs. Thompson whispered. Can you ever forgive us? I don't know, I answered honestly. I'm glad you're finally realizing how your behavior affects others, but I can't just forget everything that's happened. 2 days later, a delivery truck brought a large package. Inside was the latest iPhone, the exact one Emma had been dreaming about, along with a heartfelt letter of apology from her grandparents. I sent James's boys their gaming consoles back, with a note, everyone deserves a real Christmas. Now, 6 months later, we have a cautious peace. We meet occasionally for coffee or lunch in neutral places. The Thompsons are really trying, to change. No more pranks, no more cruel jokes. Emma video chats with her cousins sometimes, and I've seen genuine remorse in my in-laws' eyes. David would be proud of this progress, I think. He always hoped his family would understand someday. Maybe they finally do. I never thought I'd get married again at 44, but life has a way of surprising you. My name is Dorothy, and I met Robert at a colleague's retirement party. He was charming, successful, and 2 years older than me. After my first marriage ended, I'd focused on raising my daughter Emily, never expecting to find love again. But Robert changed all that. We clicked immediately, sharing the same dry sense of humor and love for quiet evenings at home. We both had our baggage, me with my daughter Emily, and him with Jessica. Emily was 22 then, already dating her boyfriend Mark seriously. Jessica was about the same age, living on her own and working at a marketing firm downtown. I remember being so nervous about meeting her, wanting to make a good impression. That first meeting should have been a warning sign. Jessica barely looked at me, spending most of the dinner texting on her phone. When Robert asked her what she thought of me later, she just shrugged and said, "She's fine, I guess." Robert and I decided to keep things simple when we got married. No big ceremony, just a quiet affair at City Hall with our closest family members. We celebrated at a small restaurant afterward, nothing fancy, but it felt perfect to me. Emily was there, beaming with happiness for me. Jessica showed up late and left early, claiming she had work commitments. Living together in Robert's apartment took some adjustment. Emily visited often for dinner, and she and Robert got along great. He'd help her with career advice, and they'd joke around like they'd known each other forever. But Jessica, that was a different story. "Hi Jessica, how's work going?" I'd ask when she'd come over. "Fine," she'd reply, not even looking up from her phone. "I made your favorite pasta, the one your dad mentioned." Not hungry. Every conversation was like pulling teeth. I tried everything, asking about her job, her hobbies, her friends. Nothing worked. She'd answer in monosyllables if she bothered to answer at all. One evening, I was heading to the kitchen when I overheard Jessica talking to Robert in his study. The door was slightly ajar, and I know I shouldn't have listened, but I couldn't help myself. "Dad, I just don't get what you see in her," Jessica was saying, her voice dripping with disdain. "She's so basic. Nothing like Mom. Have you seen how she dresses? Total simpleton." I waited for Robert to defend me. He just sighed and said, "Honey, give her a chance. She makes me happy." I walked away quietly, my heart heavy. I'd always known I wasn't some sophisticated socialite, I'm just an ordinary woman who tries to be kind and genuine. But hearing Jessica's words hurt more than I expected. I was washing dishes one Sunday afternoon when Emily burst through the door, practically bouncing with excitement. Her cheeks were flushed, and her eyes were sparkling in a way I hadn't seen since she was a little girl. "Mom, Mom," she grabbed my wet hands, not caring about the soap suds. "Mark proposed." I dropped the plate I was holding back into the sink and pulled her into a tight hug. "Oh, sweetheart. Tell me everything." We sat at the kitchen table, and Emily told me all about how Mark had taken her to the spot where they had their first date. Robert was at work, which was probably for the best. This was a moment just for us. "He got down on one knee, Mom," Emily said, showing me the ring. "And you know what I thought about right after I said yes?" I shook my head, smiling at her enthusiasm. "Your wedding dress. The one I used to try on when I was little. Remember how you'd let me parade around in it, even though it was practically swallowing me whole?" My heart swelled. I'd kept that dress carefully preserved for 25 years, hoping for exactly this moment. "I still have it, sweetie. It's in perfect condition." Emily's eyes widened. "Really? You'd let me wear it?" "Of course. I've been saving it for you all these years. Come on, let's go look at it right now." We spent the next hour in my walk-in closet, carefully taking the dress out of its preservation box. Emily's eyes welled up when she saw it. The intricate beadwork still sparkled, and the silk was as creamy white as the day I'd first worn it. "Mom, it's even more beautiful than I remembered," she whispered, running her fingers over the fabric. "And you said this was from that famous designer, right? The one who just passed away last year?" I nodded. "Yes, it was one of his early pieces. I saved for months to afford it. $3,000 was a fortune back then." A few days later, I was scrolling through my social media feed when I saw Emily's post. My daughter had always had a flair for the dramatic, and this announcement was no exception. "In 6 months, I'll be walking down the aisle in something incredibly special," she'd written. "My mom's vintage wedding dress from one of fashion's most legendary designers. Starting a new family tradition, all the women in our family will wear this piece of history. Can't wait to share photos of my beautiful mom in her youth, wearing this dress, alongside my wedding photos. Vintage bride, family tradition, designer." The comments started pouring in immediately. Emily's friends were going crazy over it. "Oh my God, isn't that the designer whose vintage pieces are selling for like $50,000 now? You're so lucky. That dress must be worth a fortune. Please tell me you'll post the side-by-side photos. That's such a cool tradition." Emily responded to them all, clearly enjoying the excitement. When someone asked about the original price, she wrote, "Mom spent about $3,000 on it back then. Best investment ever, right?" As I read through the comments, I couldn't help but smile at my daughter's enthusiasm. But something in the back of my mind nagged at me, a strange feeling that this social media post was going to cause trouble. I just didn't know how right that feeling would turn out to be. It was a quiet Thursday afternoon when the doorbell rang. Robert was at work, and I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door and saw Jessica standing there, I almost didn't believe my eyes. In the 3 years I'd been married to Robert, she had never once come to see me when her father wasn't home. "Can I come in?" she asked, her tone unusually polite. "I need to talk to you about something." I stepped aside, still trying to process this unexpected visit. "Of course. Would you like some coffee?" "No, thanks." She walked straight to the living room and sat down, her designer purse perched perfectly on her lap. Something about her demeanor made me nervous. She seemed too composed, too deliberate. "I saw Emily's post," she said without preamble, her fingers fidgeting with the clasp of her purse. "About the wedding dress." "Oh?" I sat down across from her, wondering where this was going. Jessica had never shown any interest in anything related to Emily before. "My wedding is in 4 months," she continued, looking directly at me for what felt like the first time ever. 2 months before Emily's. I nodded, still not quite following. "Yes, Robert mentioned that. The planning is going well, I hope?" Jessica leaned forward slightly. "I want to wear the dress." The words hung in the air between us. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard her. The designer dress, she clarified, as if I might not understand. The one Emily posted about. I want to wear it at my wedding. My mouth opened and closed a few times before I found my voice. Jessica, I don't think that would be appropriate. That dress has been promised to Emily since she was a little girl. But I'm getting married first, she pressed, her voice taking on an edge I knew too well. And I'm your stepdaughter now. Shouldn't that mean something? I took a deep breath, trying to gather my thoughts. Jessica, Emily has been dreaming about wearing this dress since she was tiny. She used to put it on and twirl around in it when it was practically dragging on the floor behind her. It's been our special thing for over 2 decades. So reschedule her wedding, Jessica said, as if it was the most obvious solution in the world. Let me wear it first, then she can have it. I shook my head slowly. That's not how this works. Emily and Mark have already booked their venue, sent save the dates. But listen, if you really want to wear the dress, maybe you could consider moving your wedding to after Emily's? Then you could. Are you seriously suggesting I postpone my entire wedding? Her eyes narrowed. Think about it logically, I tried to reason with her. You're getting married first. If you wear the dress, everyone will see it in your wedding photos, all over social media. You and Emily share so many mutual friends, they'll all see both weddings. Emily would be devastated to walk down the aisle in a dress that's already been splashed all over Instagram from your wedding. Can you understand how that would make her feel? Jessica's face turned red, and she jumped to her feet so quickly that her designer purse fell to the floor. You're just a selfish, greedy witch, she screamed, her composure completely shattered. You've never wanted me to be part of this family. You probably get some sick pleasure from saying no to me. I stood up too, stunned by the sudden outburst. Jessica, please, that's not. Save it. She was practically shaking with rage now. You're just a gold digger who married my dad, and now you won't even do one nice thing for his real daughter. You're nothing but a mean, stingy, pathetic woman who thinks she's so special because she has some old designer dress. Tears were streaming down her face as she grabbed her purse from the floor. Her mascara was running, leaving black streaks down her cheeks. Jessica, please sit down. Let's talk about this rationally. Rational? You want rational? She was screaming so loud now that I was sure the neighbors could hear. How's this for rational? I hate you. I've always hated you, and now I know I was right about you all along. She stormed out of the apartment, slamming the door so hard that the pictures rattled on the walls. I sank back onto the couch, my hands shaking. In 3 years of dealing with Jessica's cold shoulder, I'd never seen her lose control like that. I spent the next few hours in a daze, replaying the conversation in my head, wondering if I could have handled it differently. When I heard Robert's key in the lock that evening, my stomach clenched. I knew what was coming. He didn't even take off his coat. What the hell did you do to my daughter? Robert, please let me explain. Explain what? He threw his briefcase on the chair. How you made my little girl cry. How you couldn't do one simple thing for her. I took a deep breath. It's not simple, and you know it. That dress has been promised to Emily since she was a child. It's been our special thing for 25 years. Jessica is your family now too. Robert's voice rose. Or at least she's supposed to be. She's my daughter, Dorothy. My daughter. And you treat her like she's nothing. That's not fair. I felt tears pricking at my eyes. I've tried so hard with Jessica. For 3 years, I've tried. But this isn't about accepting her, this is about a promise I made to my daughter long before I even met you. It's just a dress, Robert shouted. One day. That's all she's asking for. It's not just a dress, I was shouting now too. It's a symbol of everything I promised my daughter. It's about her childhood dreams, about the tradition we planned together. How can you not see that? All I see is my wife refusing to do something nice for my daughter. Something that would make her happy on the most important day of her life. And what about Emily? What about her happiness? Does that matter to you at all? Robert's face hardened. Emily isn't my daughter. Those 4 words hung in the air between us like poison. We stared at each other across the living room, both breathing hard, both realizing we'd crossed a line we couldn't easily come back from. The silence in our apartment was deafening for the next few days. Robert slept in the guest room, and we performed an awkward dance of avoiding each other, taking turns in the kitchen, waiting until the other person left a room before entering. The weight of unspoken words hung heavy between us. One evening, as I was making dinner, Robert came into the kitchen and stood there, looking tired and worn. Neither of us spoke for a moment, just listening to the sound of pasta boiling on the stove. "Robert," I finally said, turning down the heat. "I think I have a solution." He looked at me warily, but pulled out a kitchen chair and sat down. It was the first time we'd properly faced each other in days. "There's this seamstress I know, Maria Rodriguez. She's incredible, one of the best in the city. She could make Jessica a dress that's inspired by mine. Same style, same elegance, but uniquely hers." Robert's expression softened slightly, so I continued. "Maria uses the finest materials, French lace, Italian silk. She's made dresses for some of the wealthiest families in town. My friend Sarah's daughter had her make her wedding dress last year, and it was absolutely stunning. Everyone at the wedding thought it was a designer piece." "How much would something like that cost?" Robert asked, his voice less harsh than it had been in days. "Don't worry about that," I said quickly. "I want to pay for it. It would be my wedding gift to Jessica. I really want to make this right, Robert. I want to show Jessica that I care about her happiness too." I could see hope flickering in Robert's eyes. He reached for his phone. "Let me call her right now. This could work. This could really work." I held my breath as he dialed Jessica's number and put it on speaker. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Dad? Honey, listen. Dorothy has a great idea. There's this amazing seamstress who could make you a dress just like." "Are you kidding me?" Jessica's voice cut through the kitchen like a knife. "A knockoff? You want me to wear some cheap copycat dress made by some random local seamstress?" "Jessica, she's actually very well known," I tried to interject. "Shut up," she screamed through the phone. "I don't want to hear your voice. I want the dress. The designer dress. Not some pathetic imitation from some nobody dressmaker." "Sweetheart, just listen," Robert attempted. "No, you listen. I need that dress. That exact dress. I'm not walking down the aisle in some bargain basement reproduction. God, I can't believe you're even suggesting this. Jessica, please. This is insulting. I'd rather wear a trash bag than some fake version of that dress. Don't call me back unless you're going to tell me I can have the real thing." The call ended abruptly, leaving Robert and me sitting in stunned silence at our kitchen table. The pasta was boiling over on the stove, but neither of us moved to turn it off. The next morning, I was making coffee when Robert's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and immediately put it on speaker. "Hi, Dad," Jessica's voice filled the kitchen. She sounded calmer than yesterday, almost calculated. "I've been thinking about this whole situation." Robert shot me a hopeful look. "Yeah? What's on your mind, sweetheart?" "Well, since your wife is being so difficult about the dress, I noticed how she refused to use my name. I found another solution. I found this amazing designer dress. It's perfect, actually better than that old one she's hoarding." "That's great, honey," Robert smiled. "Problem solved then?" "Almost. It's $20,000. I nearly dropped my coffee mug. "I figure since she won't give me the dress, you can just give me the money instead. It's only fair, right?" I watched Robert's face carefully, expecting him to laugh it off. Instead, he was nodding thoughtfully. "Let me think about it, honey. We might be able to work something out." That's when I lost it. "Are you out of your mind?" I exploded. $20,000? 20,000? Robert covered the phone with his hand. "Dorothy, please. No, you please. I was shaking with anger now. You're already paying for her entire wedding. The venue, the catering, the flowers, everything. And the 2-week honeymoon in the Maldives. Have you completely lost your mind? Jessica's voice came through the speaker. Oh great, she's there. Always trying to control everything. This is insane, I continued. This isn't about the dress anymore. This is emotional manipulation, and you're falling for it. Robert's face darkened. None of this would be happening if you'd just given her the dress in the first place. One day, Dorothy. That's all she wanted, one damn day. Oh, so this is my fault? Your daughter throws a tantrum and demands $20,000, but somehow I'm the unreasonable one? Yes, it is your fault. He was shouting now too. You're the one who started all of this. You're the one who couldn't make one small sacrifice for my daughter's happiness. Small sacrifice? You want me to betray a promise I made to my daughter 25 years ago, and you call that a small sacrifice? Dad, Jessica's voice cut in, are you going to let her talk to you like this? Something snapped inside me. Without another word, I walked to our bedroom and pulled out my suitcase. Robert followed me. What are you doing? What does it look like? I started throwing clothes into the suitcase. I'm leaving. I'm going back to my old apartment. You're being ridiculous. No, what's ridiculous is that you can't see what's happening here. What's ridiculous is that you're willing to throw away our marriage over a spoiled tantrum and $20,000. Dorothy, stop. But I was already zipping up the suitcase. I grabbed my purse, my keys, and walked to the door. The last thing I heard as I left was Jessica's voice from the phone. Dad? Are you still there? About that money. I hadn't planned on looking at Jessica's wedding photos. In fact, I'd been avoiding social media entirely since I moved back to my old apartment. But one evening, after a glass of wine, curiosity got the better of me. The photos appeared perfect, of course. Jessica stood beaming in a clearly expensive dress, all lace and crystals, probably worth every penny of that $20,000. Her father stood proudly beside her, and I felt a pang in my chest seeing Robert in his tuxedo, smiling like nothing was wrong in the world. Then I saw Jessica's caption beneath the main photo collection. The most perfect day of my life. My heart is so full knowing that everyone who truly loves me was there to share this magical moment. No drama, no negativity, just pure joy and love. So grateful that nobody who wanted to spoil this special day was present. Perfect wedding, true love, family first. My fingers tightened around my wine glass as I read it. The dig was obvious, subtle enough to seem innocent to outsiders, but clear as day to me. What hurt more than her words, though, was seeing Robert's like on the post. He knew exactly what she meant, and he'd endorsed it. 2 months crawled by. I threw myself into helping Emily with her wedding preparations, grateful for the distraction. She'd sent Robert an invitation, complete with a handwritten note telling him how much his presence would mean to her. He never responded. The morning of Emily's wedding dawned bright and clear. As I helped her into my dress, our dress, I couldn't hold back my tears. Mom, don't cry. Emily laughed, though her eyes were wet too. You'll ruin your makeup. Happy tears, baby, I assured her, adjusting the vintage lace around her shoulders. Just happy tears. The dress fit her perfectly, as if it had been made for this moment. The same dress I'd worn 25 years ago, the one she'd played dress-up in as a little girl. Seeing her in it now, radiant and grown up, made every bit of drama worth it. I can't believe I'm finally wearing it for real, she whispered, turning to look in the mirror. It's even more beautiful than I remembered. The ceremony was everything we'd dreamed it would be. Emily practically floated down the aisle, the vintage silk rustling softly with each step. Mark's face when he saw her, that look of pure love and awe, made my heart soar. I kept glancing at the empty seat where Robert should have been, but I refused to let his absence dim the joy of the day. This was Emily's moment, the fulfillment of a childhood dream, and nothing could spoil that. During the reception, I watched my daughter twirling on the dance floor in my dress, laughing and happy, surrounded by people who truly loved her. No snide comments, no hidden agendas, no drama, just pure, uncomplicated joy. It's been 4 months since Emily's wedding. The seasons have changed, leaves have fallen, and my old apartment feels both familiar and strange. Sometimes I wake up reaching for Robert's side of the bed, only to remember he isn't there. Hasn't been there for months now. Last week, I finally packed away my own wedding photos, the ones from that simple ceremony at City Hall with Robert. They'd been sitting in a drawer since I moved back here, like a question I wasn't ready to answer. As I tucked them into a box, I found myself wondering if he ever thinks about that day, about how happy we were before a wedding dress of all things tore us apart. Emily visits often. She and Mark are settling into married life beautifully, and seeing her happiness helps confirm that I made the right choice. Yesterday, over coffee, she asked if I regretted not giving Jessica the dress. No, I told her honestly. Some promises need to be kept, no matter the cost. She squeezed my hand and said, "I'm sorry it cost you your marriage, Mom." But did it? Was it really the dress that ended things, or did it just expose cracks that were already there? Robert and I haven't spoken since Emily's wedding. No calls, no texts, not even through lawyers. Just silence. He hasn't made a single attempt to reach out, to try to understand my side of things, to find a way forward together. Sometimes, when I'm alone at night, I imagine him picking up the phone, finally ready to talk. I picture us working through this, finding our way back to each other. After all, we did love each other once, deeply, genuinely. Part of me still does. But I won't be the one to make that first call. I offered solutions. I tried to compromise. I even offered to pay for a beautiful custom-made dress for Jessica. What more could I have done? Some might say I'm being stubborn, that pride isn't worth losing a marriage over. But this isn't about pride, it's about standing up for what's right, about keeping your word, about teaching your children that their dreams and feelings matter. The wedding dress hangs in Emily's closet now, wrapped in tissue paper and memories. Sometimes I think about how something so beautiful, something meant to symbolize love and tradition, became the catalyst for so much pain. But then I remember Emily's face when she wore it, the way she glowed walking down the aisle, and I know I'd make the same choice again. Maybe someday Robert will understand that. Maybe someday he'll realize that true love means supporting each other's principles, not just giving in to demands. Maybe someday we'll find our way back to that simple happiness we had before. But until then, I'll be here in my old apartment, living with my choice. Because sometimes doing the right thing means walking a lonely path. And sometimes love means knowing when to stand your ground, even if it means standing alone.